I have to.
Yeah, I don't see that. I just see you at all times.
Oh, are you just watching through Skype?
Yeah, so I'm just seeing your camera.
Yeah. I could send you the link, but then you're
No,
going to be confused because it's going to be like 10 or 15 seconds behind.
No,
hey, everyone.
Don't do that.
Welcome to FCP TV Live. And today I have this is a very special guest, all the way from the UK, Mr. John Matthews.
Hello. Well, I'm hearing.
You're hearing what?
Sound in my ear. I'm hearing sound in my ear, delayed back.
Oh, you are?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. So you.
I'm hearing sound coming back about 20 seconds.
Are you monitoring? Do you have Facebook or YouTube up? Because that's what you're probably hearing is a live stream. If on your browser.
Let's just try that now. How's that? Yes,
how's
clean.
How about now? Is that better?
That's clean. Hello, everybody.
That's
Sorry
better.
about that.
That's okay.
Finger trouble at my end.
No, we had some technical issues. Some technical issues, so we switched John over to Skype, and everything works fine. We have my camera here and John's camera there, and then both of us right there. So we're fine. And we also have this, John. You can't see this, but the audience can. This is it's my backyard, and I'm going to wait a second. I'm going to bring you up there too. Where in the heck are you? Turn this down. I'm going to get you back on here. I guess I can't do that right now. I'm not going to do that live. We're already. I'm just going to keep on getting. But anyway, I have a picture of my bird feeder in the backyard. Usually, I do that cam, and I also have an overhead cam. This is my overhead cam, but today, listen, John, you were on one of the Facebook groups. I think Final Cut Pro Radio TV, and whenever a discussion about Avid came up, you sent me these great long explanations. I love those, though. You know why I like them?
I don't know.
You know why I like them, John? Because they're not arguments. So I'm not a person that gets involved with arguments because usually they're just complete waste of time. When Final Cut Pro 10.0 came out, people were, arguing, right?
Yes.
No. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you. Okay, I'm not arguing with you. I have an opinion, you have an opinion, but I'm not going to argue about things. You very seldom persuade anybody with arguments, right? So, but anyway, you would text me these really long explanations of how Avid does things. And I was really curious because I read through them and I said, well, that's really interesting. But the other thing is you are also a Final Cut Pro editor.
Absolutely. Yes. I've been there right from the start of Final Cut 10. Got into Final Cut Pro 7 maybe in the mid 2000s when I was looking for something that I could take on the road that wasn't Avid,
Right.
didn't need a barrel load of kit really, that you could just literally just point to files and they could be still in record growing and you could turn things around really quickly. So that's how it all started for me. I'm not really an Avid evangelist at all. It's just unfortunately I'm kind of stuck with it. I want a divorce really. I've been there since the 1997.
You want a divorce? Yeah.
Yes, but I suppose the frustration is that I can't get to use Final Cut Pro 10 and I have to use Avid, and I'm a conciliatory sort of guy, and I want to try and
Sure.
I think my frustration comes out as this kind of grumpy. My persona on Facebook is kind of that grumpy old man, but actually I'm not a grumpy old man. I could have been, but by going freelance 9 years ago and getting into Final Cut, I've actually stopped myself becoming golden grey, and it wasn't like that in my day, sort of thing. So I'm actually very positive when you actually meet me. It just comes across as a bit sort of blunt north of England sometimes.
Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
So let's start from. I have questions about Avid. I started. I was a post supervisor at the National Archives in D.C. 10 years ago. I think I quit 3 or 4 years ago because I got tired of driving 3-hour round trip every day. But when I went down there for my interview, the gentleman who was interviewing me said he saw my resume. It had nothing about Avid, zero. It just said all Final Cut Pro, certification, editor, independent, producer and stuff. And he said, well, we have an Avid edit suite. And I said, okay, that's fine. I can learn Avid. And then he said, on the PC. I said, oh, man, to myself. I said, I don't know anything about PCs. I mean, a little bit. I said, that's not a problem. I said, I'll learn. So I started Avid, and the PC kept breaking down, and I don't know how to troubleshoot. So I ended up getting either a G5 or an Intel Mac Pro that we had in the theater, and it got it up to the edit suite, and I switched it over to Final Cut Pro. And then I switched to 10, et cetera, et cetera. So I switched it over, but I was learning Avid. It wasn't, I just downloaded PDFs and I made my own checklist. How do I do this? How do I do X? How do I do Y and Z? One of the worst things about it was their titler was horrible.
Oh, well, it's got worse.
Is that right?
I don't think you could say it's got better. No,
that's too
big
bad.
Bone of contention with the latest version, because the titler was very QuickTime, and they hadn't updated it since 2001. And when QuickTime went away, they had to make a new one, and they weren't ready. So don't even talk about the titler.
Okay, well that was one of my biggest outtakes from the very beginning. Yeah. So I was so used to just updating a title in Final Cut Pro itself, and then in Avid you had to go do this round tripping kind of a thing. It was just bizarre, and it was just very clunky. But anyway, let's tell everybody who you are, because I forgot to introduce you properly. So you're John Matthews. You're from the UK.
Yes, I am English, but I live in Scotland, from the north of England originally. Been here in Glasgow for 30 odd years. I worked for the BBC from the age of 18. Very charmed life, really had all the training that was thrown at me in 1979 when I joined. And for some mysterious reason, I moved to Glasgow from London. So I'd worked on some major things down there, not as an editor, as radio links and technical stuff. And I've come up here and been an editor since the mid 80s, really. So yes, from the UK, working in television, really, but don't work for the BBC anymore. I left in 2012 and
you did
freelance, yeah. So I kind of work for myself. Didn't think I'd ever work again when I walked away, but actually, it's fantastic. There seems to be loads of work.
Why did you walk away?
Just had enough, really, of nothing working. I was part of the. I'm actually in the BBC at the moment because I was slightly concerned about my internet connection at home because we're moving house and don't have a landline. So I left because I just had enough, really, of Avid and it not working. And I just thought I really need to take control. So we had the first ever interplay system, which is the work group collaboration thing that Avid is
Right.
famous for, really. I mean, they are the only show in town. So we had that, and we were the guinea pigs in 2007 when they built this building, which was a lot of money, a couple of £100 million, purpose-built.
Wow.
Yeah, on the River Clyde in Glasgow here. And we were the guinea pigs, and we had 96 terabytes and Interplay, and it didn't work. I mean, it just didn't work. I think Avid had bought Interplay from a gaming company, the actual hardware and the software. So there was a lot of pain involved in that. And I just sort of thought I need to do something else. And there's a whole world out there, which there is. And absolutely,
there is.
So, maybe, but I do work for them still. And I love the BBC. I mean, I love them, and I'm very emotional about them because it's, patron of the arts, and it's not
sure. No, absolutely.
And all the rest of it. It's a political football, and I don't know how it will survive going forward because there's so many outlets now, aren't there? Multi-platform, Netflix is encroaching on a lot of it. But yeah, the principle of it is great, and it's certainly what I think you guys think about when you think of the UK and Britain and TV is the BBC.
Right. I've been to London about 6 times, not recently, but in the starting in the late 70s, 80s, and in the 90s. And I love it over there. Well, my name's Taylor, so I'm sure there's British somewhere in my background. And I loved it over there. Every time I've been there, I've been to Paris once, been to London like 6 times. Mostly for music stuff. I was a musician, and I had friends that were musicians. The guy from the Screaming Blue Messiahs, Bill Carter. Remember them? I Want to Be a Flintstone, their big hit single? Bill Carter and I are friends, so I usually stay at his place over there when I'm over there in the UK, one of the places that I stayed. But I've always liked it.
London. I love London. Absolutely love it. And I went there when I was 18 from a little tiny village in the Lake District. And I had this, it was 1979, all these fantastic, iconic TV shows. I just could not believe it, really. But, when I got promotion, really, to move here, that was one of the reasons.
I see.
It certainly wasn't a career move. And if you don't like rain, don't come to Glasgow. We get 6 foot of rain a year here. I think we get nearly 60. Where I live is 57 inches, I think we get. And that's nothing compared to a bit further north. So it's being on the west, it's an incredibly wet place. But a brilliant city. It's the second city of the empire originally was Glasgow. Much diminished now because of industry disappearing, but shipbuilding and sugar and tobacco.
Right.
It's a lovely Victorian city, actually. It's a nice place, and has a real identity. And there's loads of TV here. There is, always has been.
So I've heard that is the BBC in London. Do you guys? Is it the same organization? You guys talk to each other, Scotland and in London, both?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's the British Broadcasting Company. So this is the UK, Great Britain. So there were 20,000 employees originally. I don't know now how many. It's much diminished, but it's still a huge force to be reckoned with. And people say it distorts the market. Well, it absolutely does, because it's a £1,500 billion organisation or something. There's a poll tax that everybody pays. I think it's only 42 pence a day or something, but it's perceived as being quite expensive. But it's national. It's national. And up here, although Scotland has got its own identity, it has now got a channel of its own. It's still, a joined up thing, the BBC, yes.
So I thought I heard that there are some editors, at least in London, using Final Cut at the BBC. Does that sound...
So I did a little bit of research, because I am a little bit out on a limb here. So the production village in London, which was in the West End near Regent Street, they do documentaries, and they do Horizon, which is a sort of flagship thing, Louis Theroux, and they cut those on Final Cut Pro. I spoke to the guy there, Angus Anderson, just the other day, and he said he doesn't force people to use Final Cut. So really what they managed to do, and this is brilliant really, is that they if the editor says, I'm using Final Cut, then they will support it. So when I visited there, I went to work on the London Olympics in 2012, and I went and saw him then, it was entirely Final Cut. But I think now it's basically, you tell us what you want and we'll do it. So he does Resolve, he does Premiere, does Avid, and survives on the basis of not having to collaborate So it's one unit, and I think
Right.
that's the key really. And especially Final Cut, because it doesn't really scale like Avid does. I don't think if you've got
that's
10 fingers in the pie.
From a Final Cut Pro editor, and I said, I used Avid about 10 years ago for a while. There's two things with Avid that people constantly bring up. The ability to, in Final Cut, it's called the precision editor. What do they call that in Avid? Something else?
Well, it's just trimming, isn't it?
Trimming.
Dynamic trimming.
Dynamic trimming. That's the one thing.
Yeah.
And the second thing, of course, is, like you said, collaboration. Those constantly get beat over our heads that Avid can do those superior. So let's go through collaboration first. Now, clarify for me.
Yeah.
The collaboration part, it seems like it's tied to the hardware, to the servers and stuff.
No, not at all. I think
okay.
When they designed it was 1989, I think, when the thing was originally designed. It's something to do with RAM limitations. This is why, although a bin is a film term, but the bin was the lowest thing they could have, and they couldn't address enough RAM. So they made the thing so that the smallest unit was a bin, which just happened to be a folder, or in film terms, a sort of thing that you put trims in. So all you really need is a bin. So you can collaborate with each other just by sharing a bin across a network, or you could even attach it to an email, because they're very, very small. I don't even remember Final Cut 7's projects were very small.
Yes.
Well, a bin, it's kilobytes really for a really complex show. But the key to that is that the media doesn't have a direct path. It all has to live in the right place. So it's kind of in the root of your attached storage.
Okay.
And so when you send a bin to somebody, because it uses its own media, and a lot of people castigate it for this because it means it takes longer to import stuff. But when it makes its own media, it has this opportunity to write a unique identifier to it, which is a big string of, hexadecimal numbers, I think. And so really, all you need is a bin and two sets of media, and the clips are the same. So when you edit on your clips, they are clones of hidden reference clips. So the real clips, you never see them. So the clips in your bins are clones. So when you give a bin to somebody else, it's the same metadata instance.
Okay.
Can't do that in Final Cut, because if I gave you some clips, they'd be copies.
Sure.
You'd have your clips and I'd have my clips, and never the twain shall meet. So that's why it works so well, because you don't need to be techie. You just literally just share a bin and bang. You could even pull out the drive, put it back in again. So you never ever have to relink anything, as long as you have the media in that designated place, which is just in the root.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
No,
that's a huge thing, I think.
No, I always thought it was somehow tied to the infrastructure, and this is one of the reasons, from a Final Cut Pro editor's point of view, that places like Hollywood doesn't want to change. Besides the editors being perhaps a bit stubborn, because they know Avid. Why would they change something else? It always seemed like the infrastructure, the hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars and all this servers and stuff was a deterrent to change. So I didn't realize, that's what it seemed like for me. So I didn't realize that you don't need all that to do the sharing.
You don't.
Okay.
No, I mean, obviously the bin locking software, which was proprietary, although there's lots of third parties doing, and even Post Labs are now doing bin locking.
Right.
Is a very crude thing. It's just a file that says who's got the bin open, and bin locking is a very crude. I mean, one would hope that if Apple eventually do collaboration, it would be much more sophisticated. But yeah, that's only a very small part of the story. I think it's the media management and the fact that these clips that you use, it knows about them. It knows about the other person 400 miles away has on the same clip. So if you change the color, yours change. It sort of fights it out on sort of modified time. So you don't get that diverging. Because I know we all think that you do it all in the browser and it's linear and you then edit it and you never go back. But if you're working with 20 people, it's only when you get to the end you realize that you should have called it such and such. And so, yeah, I think that the USP of Avid is the fact that there's no relinking and the clips are hidden, and you work on a clone of a hidden clip. Yeah, and the locking is just a means of permissions. That's just to stop you overwriting each other's sequences, really, when you're on a shared system. But working remotely.
Well, that's important. You don't want to mess up somebody
No.
else's.
I think you asked the question though about how would you tell somebody to close a bin?
Oh yeah, let me give my point of view.
Yes.
When I've talked, you're like maybe the third or fourth person who really knows Avid. And I talked to Michael Yanovich, and I talked to and I talked to his wife before him, a year or two before him. Yes, she was an Avid, and I had her on specifically, and she was concerned that since it's Final Cut Pro Radio, it would be, bashing Avid. I said, no, I want to learn that. I want to learn about it. One of the things that everybody's told me is there's no direct way to communicate in the Avid application. If somebody left the bin locked and that you want to work on it, there's no direct way to communicate and say, hey, can you unlock this bin? You got to use cell phones, you got to use intercom, you got to use SneakerNet. That seems like that should be easy.
But it isn't really the problem that you think it is. Because if you think when you did very simple peer-to-peer collaboration with Final Cut 7 was amazing because it didn't have a database.
It was a great application.
I know that you really like your Finder organization, don't you? So with Final Cut 7, you literally just had a load of files in a Finder.
Yes.
And 200 people could all point to these same files and work on their own. But if you just wanted to get somebody else's cut, you just had to sniff around and opened up their project and dragged out. And then you closed it again and it didn't save it. So it's kind of like that with bin locking. You don't really need to.
I see.
But obviously if it's a sequence, then you could copy it because you can open it. You can always see it. And you would maybe take half of it at the beginning and somebody else could be working on the end. And then eventually you'll say, close that bin and I'll give it you back. But it's not really the problem that you think it is.
Okay.
Because it's kind of read only. Does that make sense?
Yes. It just I didn't consider it a problem. I just thought it was kind of peculiar that something wasn't built in, that people were going to the next edit suite, walking over and asking somebody or whatever. It seems like that should have been built into the app. It seems.
But remember also that, that you've got events in Final Cut 10, haven't you, which are kind of bins. But in Avid, you can have your own clones, so you're not even using other people's. The clips are the same clips.
I see.
They're in 10 different places, if you like. So that kind of scotches the kind of, because Final Cut has a different way of looking at it with range-based keywords and things, and it represents the same thing in many different ways. With Avid, it's more of a tangible thing. They actually physically are your clips, but they are connected to the other ones. Am I making sense?
Yes.
They know about it.
I understand. So the other question is, well, since we're talking about that, do you think Final Cut's going to be going forward trying to do some of this collaboration? I'm not convinced that it's that important for Final Cut.
No, I don't know. I mean, obviously, whenever I've spoken to people like Ronnie Curtins and stuff, they'll say, well, 80% of the user base have to use it before they'll implement it. Say you were asking for AAF support or something like that. So it does seem like it may well go to a third party. And I think PostLabs, and now they've got PostLabs Drive, haven't they now?
Right.
But it doesn't seem set up because we didn't have libraries originally, when you remember, with 10.0. But with the library thing, it's an island, isn't it? It's very difficult to see how you can't both be in it at the same time. You can make a copy of it, which is kind of what PostLabs does.
Right.
It's a bit clunky, isn't it? Because it's a whole library and all you really want is one little element of it. So I think they might have to go back to the drawing board if they were going to do that. Don't know. I mean, they need to come up with something that we've just never thought we needed. That's far better than anything.
That's perfect explanation. I think that they are doing something big. I don't think that the fact that 10.4 came out 38 months ago, over 3 years.
I know.
Yes, we got 10.5, but that's not the real update. That's just a marketing update to get the Apple Silicon. Well, they didn't do anything. I mean, every other version, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, 10.4, major update with lots of new things. 10.5 was like this. Now, I understand. I'm not saying it's not a lot of work. I understand that completely. But we're still waiting on that update from 10.4. with the major update. And I think the fact that it's taking so long is it's going to be major. That's my opinion. So Tangier Clark says, does Avid use symlinks?
No, I mean, it uses, it just uses its own media. And when you open up the application, it goes and looks in a certain place.
Okay.
And if it sees media, so you could have 10 drives connected, all daisy chained together, and it goes, where are these drives? Oh, right, there they are. And it loads as a couple of databases. The databases live with the media. This is a different thing as well. This is very different than Final Cut. So it sees these databases and it loads it all up. And then it's just a case of opening the bins. And then when you open the bin, it says, have I got that? Yes, bang. And up it comes and the lights go on. So it doesn't use links at all.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what you call the drive, and it doesn't matter where it is in as much as it needs to be at the root and then in a specific folder structure.
Right.
But you can't. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. I mean, obviously, Avid have been hit hard with the fact that it takes forever to import media sometimes. So in the old days, even a still is a piece of moving media. In fact, it still is. You can't. It's not got resolution independence, and you can't work with JPEGs and TIFFs as they are unless you link to them. So about 10, 15 years ago, they created a sort of Premiere Pro sort of way that you can just, like Final Cut 7, where you can link to the media. But that's when it's not robust. That's when it becomes quite flaky, because you can imagine you have the stuff all over the place. But if you use Avid media files themselves, then it is the real stuff you're looking at. It's not symlinks.
Okay. So it seems like that Avid wins there as far as linking to media. Not Final Cut, you have to have the exact same drive name. Everything has to be exactly the same, or there's no chance of it linking up.
Yeah, and there's no chance of it linking to the wrong thing either. So a lot of people complain about Avid has got a very sophisticated relinking dialog box with a left and a right, and you can do it on custom fields, names, file extensions. It is the full booner. There's a huge amount. It's a volume of that in the book, but it doesn't go wrong. If you are on a clip and somebody else has got that same clip, then you won't need to relink it, because it will find it, because when it opens the application, it will load those databases. So
that's pretty good. That seems like it's really, really a nice way to do it.
It is very robust, and it means that it can scale. Yeah, it can scale.
Exactly.
But Interplay, can I just talk about Interplay for a minute?
Absolutely.
Interplay is a work group solution. So you can have shared storage and bin locking, and that's been around since the early 90s. And it's a very crude, open a bin and it says it's locked and you can't save to it. Close it, you've got write access to it. But Interplay is a proper asset manager, so you still have your bins. You've got your bins, I've got my bins, but you check things into it and you update things from it, and it tracks, and it has version control. You can destroy and edit, and you can go back and see who did it, and it just turns back into whatever it was originally. So that's Interplay. That's a very expensive solution, and that's why small companies are not going to. The BBC's fine, but nobody else is really doing that either, even on a small scale. That's the trouble. I think we've got servers, like the Jellyfish is amazing.
Right.
It's the sharing, isn't it? It's the actual collaborating that's hard. We try it with XML. We try everything, don't we? And it's a bit of a kludge, really.
Well, it certainly is. And people have their opinions on Final Cut and Avid. Now, the thing with me is I'm not a person that argues about this stuff. It just bores me to tears. Both of them are professional NLEs.
Oh, absolutely.
But what? For example, Final Cut to me has been stagnant in development over the last couple of years. Like I said, since 10.4 came out, they had 10.4.4, which is a great update, but nothing really, I say, innovative. Okay. Yeah. And I'm not talking about making it compatible for the M1 chip, and I'm not talking about making it compatible with Big Sur or, Intel and Big Sur in the M1 chip. Everybody has to do that. That's not innovation. It may be a lot of work, but it's not innovation. So it's kind of stagnated. So in December, I went out and bought the Resolve studio license. I'm still waiting on it. I bought it from B&H before
Yes,
Christmas.
And your speed editor.
Speed editor, because they gave you both for free, $2.95 for both. I said, that sounds something I want to do. So I've been playing with that without the speed editor, because that doesn't really interest me that much. I mean, we'll see. I do use the Shuttle Pro with Final Cut, and the main reason I use it, and I use it all the time, I like the little jog wheel where I can go one frame at a time, forward and backwards. I like that better than the arrow keys. So if I'm looking for a frame, like grabbing it still, for example, I like that a lot better. And I use it for that more than anything else. So we'll see what the speed editor does. Blackmagic is an amazing company. They are just such, I don't know how many betas they had since version 17 came out. I mean, 10, 11, in 6 months, they just beta, new update.
It's the complete opposite of Final Cut, isn't it? I don't know. I open it up and I dabble in it, but I don't know. I mean, it's a Swiss Army knife, isn't it? But yet,
it is.
Having all these pages, I don't know. Is a Pro Tools editor ever going to really use, they use Pro Tools. Are they going to use Fairlight? It might be you and me that wants to be able to do a bit of mixing at the same time as editing. Right. It's very difficult to know, isn't it? And it was always a coloring tool.
Exactly. It was, when Steve Jobs switched the iPod to Windows, people said, what the heck are you doing? It was a Trojan horse. Okay. I think DaVinci Resolve is exactly the same thing. Almost all the studios have DaVinci Resolve coloring application, and now they have an editor for free.
But you cannot. I mean, they respond to the user base, whereas I think it's you that said that Apple don't manage our expectations, and it is a very strange love relationship that I have with them, where you feel like you're talking to yourself, and I don't know. It's not conceit from them, because they clearly are really smart. I mean, the innovation of roles, for instance, is incredible. Yes. But there are some other things, and I know that you've got your list, and I think it used to be 15 things that an update would get crossed off it, but now, and then when you just eventually get overlapping crossfades, it does really worry me that what are they thinking of, that you cut to audio and then fade it up,
9.5 years.
Yeah. Now, maybe it just doesn't bother people other than old lags like me, but it's very, very hard to understand why you wouldn't want to, if you cut 6 shots from the same scene, it's just a road scene and there's birds tweeting and there's cars going past, 6 shots. So eventually we get these fade things, fade handles, and you can apply them in and out, but you don't cut to it and fade it up. It's a seamless, isn't it? So now you can do that, can't you? But it's kind of, it's in the preferences, isn't it?
Well, yes. And the reason they did it that way because of the roles. So it's like a double-edged sword there. When I edit my podcast, Final Cut Pro Radio, in Logic, okay? I will have, like, for example, our show today, it'll be an hour plus, and I'll edit it. If I used it, I would spit the audio out and edit it down to 45 minutes or so. Yeah. When I go into Logic and I do my edits, I can apply crossfades to every single edit with one click. With one click, I click on the track, do it in. I can do it an in crossfade, a crossfade out, or I can do not a crossfade, a fade in, fade out, or a crossfade with one click to every single edit, all at once. I can choose how long it is.
That I know, and that's fantastic that you can do that. So the problem that I have, and this is where I clash with people like Bill Davis, I think, is that it is all that mitigated by these fantastically innovative features that they're giving us, the magnetic timeline and the because I think you need these things, don't we?
Wait a minute. Did you say you're arguing with Bill Davis?
Well, we do argue, although we don't anymore. I think he's been preoccupied recently, but I think he's very much an evangelist, isn't he?
Yes,
and he loves it. I just like things that are good, and this is where it's a fantastic opportunity to be on here to say that I am not an Avid evangelist. In fact, I was Lightworks. I didn't get into Avid until the 95, 96, and it was so counterintuitive. But it is the ultimate disruptive technology, Avid Media Composer, because it killed off film editing.
Sure.
In the 90s. Everything since the English Paint in 1995 is now cut. It just went dang like that, So Final Cut Pro hasn't done that to that industry, but it's done it in a different way, that it's about video literacy, isn't it? And everybody being able to tell the stories. And I commend that. It's fantastically exciting. But I still think we kind of need these little features that have mysteriously disappeared. I can't think of anything else to describe it.
Nuts and bolts features that editors need. That's what I keep referring to.
But you feel like Oliver asking for more, though, don't you? It's like, well, why do you want this? Why do you need deep detection?
Well, that's interesting you say that, because at the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, we have private sessions with the Final Cut Pro team. I can't discuss what goes on in those meetings because they want to keep it private, which is fine. I mean, I will say a couple of things. I will say that yes, they read every email that you send in. They have to have a full-time person. That's one thing that I'm sure they wouldn't mind.
Yes.
So
Yes,
they
I understand that.
request. So that doesn't mean they're going to incorporate them. I mean, that just means they read them, and they, like any company, they have a list and they prioritize. If something gets 80% or 60% or 20%, each one gets prioritized. And it also has to do with their vision of what Final Cut should be. Mm-hmm. Okay, they have a different vision than the other NLEs right from the beginning. But the things that Final Cut Pro, I think their strengths, their magnetic timeline, the way they, well, that's part of it, the way the clips connect to the main storyline, that's a double-edged sword. Okay.
Do you think, though, that I worry that we, because obviously you don't need to convince me about the magnetic timeline. It's genius because it's about relationships, isn't it?
Right.
But is it really that hard to grasp it? Because I think we go around saying that, Final Cut isn't like anything you've ever seen before. And certainly if I was to do that to my traditional buddies, then that is almost conceited in itself. I don't think it is that different. You still have 3-point editing. You still have to trim things. It's just that you no longer have to keep sync. It knows about sync. I want to cut to this shot because the guy's talking about it. Cut to the photo. You never have to think about it again. That's the innovation, isn't it? But that's refinement. But if I keep saying, well, it's like nothing you've ever seen before, you've got to have a different approach to it. Throw away everything you've ever learned. That in itself is quite sort of inflammatory, isn't it, I think?
Well, I agree with you. Now, I wouldn't say I'm a Final Cut Pro evangelist. I am certainly a proponent because I have Final Cut Pro Radio. I have FCPX.TV, which I got before Final Cut Pro came out, right when LACPUG had that famous, the broadcast. They didn't broadcast it. They had that famous thing when Apple previewed it. I got night. That night I was sleeping because I'm on the East Coast and they're on the West Coast. I woke up on my iPad and I saw, okay, it is FCPX. So I went and got FCPX.TV. That night I got that domain. I've had it ever since. But my top 100 list, I had it out when Final Cut Pro 5 and 6 and 7 were out. I had it out in those days as well. So it didn't start with Final Cut Pro 10. But the things that Final Cut Pro, the innovation, we're going back to this word innovation. I don't see innovation in the last 2 or 3 years. No. Innovation, my magnetic timeline absolutely rolls as innovation. The live skimmer, nobody can touch the live skimmer that Final Cut Pro has.
Absolutely.
So those are all a long time ago. The innovation, where's the innovation in the last year? And don't tell me the M1 chip. That's not innovation.
No.
So
the hardware is weird, isn't it? Because the hardware, there was no hardware for a long time, and that's really why I think we'll be very difficult to get people back, really, because in 2014 we had this trash can thing, and I had one, and it overheated in no time, but it still works. I understand. In it. But I don't think those people went for Windows at that point. So everybody in Glasgow who's on Avid is not on a Mac now. So we've got an even more difficult job convincing them to use Final Cut, unless you can remote in. Maybe this lockdown thing, remote in on a PC and use a Mac. I think that's quite.
You have to see what happens there.
Yeah. But you're right. You don't want something designed by committee either. That's the trouble with this edit suite. Everything's movable in the suite because you ask 10 editors where they want things and they'll say 10 different things. So you absolutely have to trust that they know what they're doing, and the sleekness of that interface, the fact that the windows don't float, it's a coherence, isn't there? There's consistency of design, which is absolutely fabulous. You don't want another panel for this and that. But at the same time, yeah, you asked the question, where is the innovation? I don't know. It's coming, isn't it? I think.
No, exactly. That's exactly what I keep saying. I said they've got to be working on something big. This is the update, the next update, whether they call it 10.6 or Final Cut Pro 11. Now, there's a good argument for each one. Logic went from 10.5 to 10.6 in 6 months. Okay, that's the other Pro app. The other argument towards 11 is that 10 years ago, they said there's a 10-year roadmap for Final Cut Pro 10, and 10 years is up in June. So I'm not saying that they were being literal, but I could see the argument for either 10.6 or Final Cut Pro 11, a brand new app. I think it's going to be major, not going to be the normal 10.3 to 10.4, 10.4 to, it's going to be bigger than that. And I think that's where the new innovation is going to start over again or be added to. I don't think they're just putting nuts and bolts on 10.4 and 10.5. I think something bigger is happening because it's taking so long.
So whether it really matters in the end, or whether my old colleagues will ever use it, I think it would need a reboot. I think that ship has sailed. They would have been using it by now, and they are using it. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. I have massively benefited from Final Cut because I have become this kind of go-to guy. But it really is a shame. I did a documentary on the poet Robert Burns quite recently that just went out. Burns Day, sort of the national poet of Scotland, went out in January, and the only reason I got to do that was because they had no money. So they said, can we do it on Final Cut? Of course, it's cheaper doing it on Final Cut.
Yeah,
I actually finished it early. I'd never finished anything early before. But you have this resistance. When you go in there, the eyes will start to roll. People will even leave the room if you mention it. So you've really got to keep your nerve. There's a bit of prejudice, but there's a bit of pretension as well, because clearly you needed to have a lot of money to work on Avid, and people are quite protective of that. I mean, my friend Tim, the Canadian friend, paid £100,000 for his Avid in 1998 and then threw it in the skip 3 or 4 years ago. And now, this band in a box, which was Final Cut Studio, was a few £100s, wasn't it? So
it was 1,000, 1,200, I think, for one point, $999 and 1,200 for the whole studio suite originally. Yes, but
it empowered people, didn't it? Whereas with Avid, you could hide behind that, and you needed to work for the BBC to even get a shot on it, really. And you had to buy their drives and all the rest of it. But I think it's going to be difficult to get my people here to use it. News are using it all over the world. If you watch any of these hotspots, Syria, Yemen, on the ground, they're using Final Cut because it is so reliable, so fast, and they just file the stories. But it's just that talking to other bits of software, isn't it? It's how you connect into existing workflows, and the industry won't change. It has to be 10 times better before they will actually change, I think somebody said.
Well, when I've talked to the Final Cut Pro team, and they've done their presentations at the FCPX Creative Summit. So we have 2 presentations when we do that. We go see them at Cupertino at the One Infinite Loop, and they do a presentation. Then they come back to the Juniper Hotel, and we have a private session there, just the people, the attendees of Final Cut Pro and the Final Cut Pro team. And there's a couple of things about that I'm not going to reveal what went on in there, but they specifically say this is only for the attendees of Final Cut Pro Creative Summit, something special for us. But the first time we had one, I think it was they'd done it twice or 3 times. The very first one, I loved it. The head guy, I forget what his name was, he comes on and says, no audio recordings, no video recordings, no photographs. And if you don't like that, there's a Starbucks across the street. It's exactly what he said. And I said, that's fine. But they, just like you can imagine any corporation, anybody that's involved in software, they have a priority list. Mm-hmm. They're not just after Hollywood like some people would like them to be. They're not, that's not what, they're not single-minded like that. They have a priority list of different groups of people they want to take care of. YouTube is certainly important. Documentary filmmakers, education, college, and even high school, these are all very important. Is Hollywood mixed in there? Yes. But they're not the top well, it's not the top priority.
I think it is important to them, though, isn't it? Because Michael Phillips, who designed the original Avid, he is on the Avid Editors of Face group.
Okay.
And I correspond with him all the time about EDLs and XMLs and trying to get titles work. And Chris Bovey is another guy that works out of New York at PBS. I really want these people to use Final Cut Pro 10. It's good enough for them to use. And it's just, they can't be Luddites. I mean, there must be a reason why they've never even looked at it. And they're pretty open-minded people, because they're sort of my generation, and we've seen so much change. I mean, it was 2-inch tape when I started, and then 1-inch, and so on. And obviously, I wasn't a film editor, but we had telecines and 16mm and set mag bays. I even edited on VHS. So it isn't about not being willing to change. It's just some kind of perception thing that I think it is perhaps.
Oh, absolutely, sure.
Apple to say, look, I know you guys are very small now, but you've got a lot of experience, and we want you to be in our portfolio because you've got a lot to offer, not least the next generation, a lot of expertise, perhaps.
No, absolutely. Younger editors coming up, of course, if they're going to edit for Hollywood, they're going to bring Final Cut Pro with them. But Michael Cioni was on the show. You know Michael, I'm sure.
He's fantastic, yes.
Yeah, he is. And one of the things he said was, should they change the name? Because Final Cut Pro 10 had such a negative context with some people, not with everybody. Should they change the name just to get rid of that? Good question. Good question. So Final Cut Pro 11 or whatever they want to do, I don't think it would hurt. I mean, I would
change the name of projects. Change that. But yeah, I think it is. It's just a sheer hand-holding thing that I think the ball is in their court, really.
Yes.
I think we can. I've obviously marketed it for them when it doesn't need marketing, because it's a product-based thing. It speaks for itself, doesn't it? It's if you actually dive into it, it's superb, really. The magnetic timeline and just editing on it is fun, like nothing. It's made me a better editor because I've had fun with it, really. But it just doesn't project into these traditional workflows, and we can't just keep saying, well, they're on the way out and they're dead. I mean, TV in the UK, okay, my children don't watch television, but given that everybody's aging, the demographic, then people do want to watch things when they're on, and you still get 8 million people watching Strictly Come Dancing, and we want that to be cut on Final Cut Pro 10. Why wouldn't it be? It's perfect for that, for cutting down and using things like Lumberjack Builder, transcription software. Game shows are another one. So I'm going for it, but I can't do any more, really, other than just drive everybody on the Final Cut Pro side completely demented with my enthusiasm.
There you go. So you got a comment, John. It says from Nathan McAvoy. Hey, John.
Oh, he's brilliant. Yeah. I mean, he knows a lot of stuff. And I've had a few conversations with Nathan. Another very open-minded, very lateral thinking. Loves Final Cut, but
I like that.
Its shortcomings. It's just
I love people. Yeah,
it would be nice. I mean, the proxy workflow. I know that wasn't 10.5; it was 10.4.9. But they nailed it, didn't they? Nailed it.
Yes.
And they just sorted it out, really.
When that came out, first off, there were so many unusual things about that update. Number one, it was a major update, even though it was a point update, at the end of August, John. They have never, ever in the history of Final Cut Pro released any kind of a feature update in August. Everybody's on vacation. Now, that last year is different, but the end of August, they released this major update. And then when that came out, I said to myself, not myself, I mean to the TV audience and the radio audience, it seems like that could have been in 10.5. That's such a big feature, the whole proxy workflow. It seems like that could have been in 10.5. And then, of course, 10.5 came out, and it was just, the M1 chip thing.
Where do you think they are on it then? Is it? I mean, proxies were a playback thing, weren't they? They weren't a collaboration thing.
That's correct.
It doesn't do collaboration. Final Cut Pro 7 didn't really do collaboration. There was Final Cut Server and XAML, but it didn't really scale, did it? So, we can't say they've taken away something that we never really had. But proxies, it's obvious that if you're cutting something and you want to give it to somebody else to cut on the train, then you need these lightweight files. And it just suddenly became possible, didn't it? From being really quite tricky, not being able to relink them, fixed resolution proxy. ProRes proxy is pretty big.
Right. No, they're gigantic.
They designed it as a playback thing, hadn't they? It was purely for playback, I think.
Absolutely.
Originally.
Yeah, when the original proxy until 10.4.9 came out, I'm shooting 4K videos, and if I do ProRes proxy, they're larger in size than my original media. I'm shooting H.264, H.265 on a GH5, and they're more. I mean, yes, they're friendlier for editing. I understand that, but plus they're 2K. I don't want 2K. I want 720p proxy files. Put them on a hard drive.
Do you think that was a concession from the Final Cut community, that you can still have an offline-online workflow then? That because obviously it was almost like nuclear power. Throw away your electric meters. This thing can pull 5 streams of 8K. You don't even need to manage your media because the storage is so cheap. But in the end, it's still nice to have this little fit on the head of a pin project where you're editorializing, where you're just making decisions.
And plus, collaboration, mobile editing. When I used to go to DC, I'd take my laptop. Sometimes I'd edit on the, on the Metro, DC Metro. Not too often. I had about a half hour each way. But if I was really pressed for something, I would. But that absolutely is an important feature, the H.264, and then the resolution. You can do different resolutions now rather than just sticking to 50%. Yes, it's fantastic.
And I think there's XML from Frame.io. You can drag things in, and it drags in the proxies, and it links to them. I think there's going to be stuff within cameras, isn't there? They're working with camera manufacturers, and you're going to be able to, because this was at the Creative Summit, or was it Frame.io that?
Frame.io.
They heralded this thing where it's straight off the back of the camera, and you're cutting on these proxies. I mean, that's maybe where collaboration, that's maybe where Apple, or with some third-party help.
Well,
that's exciting.
One of the things that, people that pay attention to this, Final Cut Pro trademark was updated this year. The last time it was updated was 5 years ago. Apple very purposely updated the trademark for Final Cut Pro, and in the update, they included the words software rental. And of course, people extrapolated that to mean, oh my God, Final Cut Pro is going to be a software subscription. No, that's not what it means. They're kind of future-proofing themselves. They didn't update it for 5 years. So if over the next 5 years, there's going to be an app that you can buy, or if you already own it, you don't have to worry about it. There's some kind of a software rental is a possibility of something. Yeah.
But not the core item. I don't.
No, I doubt
I think
that.
There's a sort of reactionary sort of.
I mean, who can't afford $300 if you're a professional?
Well, 100,000 for a media composer in 1998. Exactly.
I don't even know what it costs now. It's still $1,000 or so.
I think it is. Yeah, it is. It's more than 1,200 UK pounds, and you have to pay the support to keep the updates. So it's expensive. Go. Yeah.
So absolutely. Nathan said, "Thanks for the kind words, John. Enjoying our brainstorming sessions."
Yeah, he's good because I give him some really crazy convoluted thing that nobody would ever want to do, and he just sort of goes like this and says, "What if you try this?" So I think I'm like using Resolve scene detection to find cuts and things, and then getting XMLs back into Final Cut. I think when I was a boy in the BBC, we were surrounded by those kind of people really, and I think since I left, I sort of lost, or they've all retired. I think I've sort of renewed that in this community really. It's very, very exciting. But I'm a bit of a lone wolf. I don't have other Final Cut Pro editors that I know other than by social media. There's one or two here, but people are pretty skeptical, really. It's depressing.
Well, yes, I understand. So the Final Cut Pro team, love those guys and gals. They're just fantastic. When people come in and go, that's fine. But they are working on something. I mean, I would be shocked if they gave us a little update for the next feature update, not the little bug fixes and stuff. They have to be working on something. So I think that we got some surprises coming. That's my
Could
thinking.
You predict anything? I mean, Rolls is amazing, isn't it? But it's got some way to go with busing, do you think? I mean, I know that you always think that a DAW is what's required for sophisticated audio. But a lot of what I do is fast turnaround TV, and the sound is as important, if not more important than anything else.
Of
Avid
course.
is very good at doing audio. Not really.
Well, no, I think I think there's going to be an audio mixer. Absolutely. Roles based, whatever they want to do with it. Because look, it's 10 years old. We just got audio crossfades. Right? I mean, you know,
Yeah, but
yes.
we've got a whole load of other stuff. I mean,
yes, yeah, oh yeah. I'm not.
I mean, this is what's
absolutely.
It's a kind of odd sort of contradiction, really.
No, I understand.
Subframe editing, isn't it, as well?
Yes.
You know, it's just odd the fades and things.
Listen, when they demoed that, I never forget when they demoed that Final Cut Pro 10 at LAFC PUG, and I watched that video over and over, and I got screen grabs. I wrote the first article on kenstone.net about Final Cut Pro 10 based on that screen grab. One of the things that I said was, they said that they have, what was the term they used? They didn't use subframe. They said sample level editing. I said, I don't think so. I think they mean subframe. And of course, technically there's a subframe thing, but you can't edit it like you can in Logic. Logic actually has a subframe.
No, there's
counter.
there's a lot of samples in a second.
Samples, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, so subframes, there's only 80 steps. It's still amazing, though.
No, that's fine frame. Because that's all you need for video, right? You gotta stay locked to a frame. I mean, for the most part. But no, when I talk about DAWs for audio, I don't necessarily mean video editing audio, because for the most part, I stay in Final Cut. But when I'm doing my podcast, for example, I have an hour and a half, 2 hours of a file I'm dealing with. I don't want to have to scroll that by hand. I don't want to keep scrolling that in Final Cut Pro, scrolling left and right and scrolling. No, I want a scrolling timeline, or they call it a stationary playhead. I want it staying right here when I'm looking at the waveforms. So that's one of the things, but there's lots of other things as well. The reason I do long form audio editing in Logic. And
you like your track-based representation
for audio.
So they addressed that with the lanes view, didn't they, really? Because it's all very well, but when things, because I've got quite a few dubbing mixer friends who use Pro Tools, and none of them really like Pro Tools, to be honest. And
really?
Oh, not really. And much preferred it before Avid bought it from DigiDesign when it was better, apparently. I mean, I'm not a Pro Tools expert, but they've used everything from synclaviers and Digital Performer, Akai DD 1500s, even just faders, Neve desks and things. None of them really rate Pro Tools. It's got an absolute iron grip.
Yes.
And I don't understand why that is. I don't understand why Logic Pro, they just say, well, it's music software, but Pro Tools was music software originally, I think.
Right.
I think they maybe tweaked it to make it more post. So what would it take to get Logic, or a button that you pushed that you could?
Yeah. Well, Logic would have to come out and say, because I was shocked when Logic 10.5 came out. I'm expecting it to be more film friendly, video editing friendly. Nope. Everything is music, which is fine. That completely reset my expectation for Logic. When they came out with 10.5 and there's nothing to, like you said, alleviate the fact that people are going to Pro Tools. Zero. It's all music based. And that's what they've always said. They have a little teeny blurb about film, but it's really, realistically, it's not. I am not clear on the features that would be necessary for Logic to incorporate them to take on Pro Tools. I don't think they're after that market.
No, I don't think they are either. They can't be really, can they? They would have done it by now, I think. It mustn't be very big either, I suppose. But Pro Tools absolutely dominates, doesn't it? But then this is where the third parties are amazing, because Marcus Broadcast Extra Pro is an amazing application.
Yes, I have that.
And if you can convince people, because they go mad at first, because it's like, why have you got 96 tracks? It's like, well, that person that gave you 96 tracks didn't know what they were doing. They had every track enabled. They just keep putting video clips in the timeline with 6 mute tracks on it. But when you show them, you call it this and it is this. It's not about where you put it. It's about what it is.
Sure.
They're blown away by that, aren't they, really? And I really think if I could get to these people and demonstrate that better, I'd be a happier person, really. But it's hard, It's like, well, where's the AAF support? I don't know.
Well, that's That's one of those things. There's no explanation why.
You can't win.
Yeah. And I don't know what the reason is. That, for example, just do two things, AAF and also B-RAW. After all this time, Final Cut Pro had ProRes RAW 3 years ago, or 3 years ago, April, I think, in AB. And 6 months later, they came up with B-RAW, Blackmagic did, and they still don't support each other for that.
No.
I'm not sure why.
No,
they work together.
There's some kind of standoff there, isn't there, with that? The brilliant thing was that the Avid codecs came back, but obviously QuickTime, 32-bit.
Yep.
And there was a huge debate about these crusty old Avid codecs, but they've come back. You can only decode them, but that's massive for people like me because it means I can secretly cut things on Final Cut and get Avid media into Final Cut again.
Right.
So that was gone. That was gone for 2.5 years.
Was it gone that long? Okay.
Yeah, and it's just frustrating, like the B-roll thing, isn't it? It's just you get a file and you can't play it. It's just all right.
Well, considering the fact that there's a lot of Blackmagic camera operators who like to edit in Final Cut Pro, and for a lot of times they won't. They'll go just stay with Resolve because they don't want to do the transcode. They want to have the options in B-RAW. It doesn't seem like Blackmagic and Apple have worked together. The eGPU. And other things. Why? As a matter of fact, the eGPU was on the Apple Store. It was on the store, so obviously there's cooperation there. Why this one thing? But I would be surprised if that continued. I think that B-RAW support is just, even if Blackmagic makes the plugin or whatever, that's fine. I think Avid were the ones that did the final. Whatever it was to make
handshaking.
Yes.
I mean, Avid got completely caught out this year because I bought this MacBook Pro, just had it a year, and Catalina came along and dropped support for QuickTime. Avid was completely screwed. I mean, for 4 months you couldn't buy a Mac and run it because it used QuickTime and to import things. Even an MP3 file, it was using QuickTime 32-bit, and they'd known about that for an awful long time. At least 8 or 9 years that it was being deprecated. Right. And they got caught and were really, really slow. And so what you've got now with Avid is you've got a new Avid where they've redesigned the UI, and you've got the old one, and people are still hanging on to the old one because their Macs are older and they don't want to learn the new one. They don't want to say goodbye. They don't want to say goodbye to Quick. So they've got themselves in a bit of a pickle with it. Really, they just left it too late. So it's a complete opposite, isn't it, with Final Cut, where it just relentlessly moves forward. You click on your library and you see it backing it up, and now we're now on the new library. Right. With Avid, I can be on, like in the BBC here, it's version 8, which is 2016. I can be on 2020, and I can just open a bin, doesn't bat an eyelid. So it's horses for courses, isn't it? I don't know if you've got 200 workstations and they update it 5 times a year, you are kind of stuck, aren't you? Really trying to keep up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That I knew that's one of the issues with people. There's multiple layers of this, Avid editors. I'm going to just say looking down on Final Cut Pro.
I hate that pretension. That's what it is.
But I mean, there's a couple layers. Number one is the hardware infrastructure, that fact, and the other, that Avid's been in Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood seems to be the crown jewel for Avid, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But I mean, no job's too big for it. It doesn't have blend layers and things. But I think it was Alex Snelling a few weeks ago on your show. Did you say, well, people just want to cut, and if they just want to be storytellers,
yes.
And even with lockdown, the business model of you think, well, the facilities houses are scuppered now, but actually no, because what's happened is that they've just sit at home. And there's a guy across the road has bought a facility that was in trouble because it lost a lot of its work. It was doing a big game show thing, and they've just got 20 Avids with kettle leads in them and network cables, and they don't even have keyboards and monitors, and the people just sit at home as if they were sitting next to the machine. So they've managed to protect I don't know how long it will sustain, but they've managed to carry on because literally they don't want to be bothered with media management. They don't have to, so they don't. And they just want to cut and trim and offline, low res. I think, you can kind of understand. Nobody likes change, do they?
No, I understand human nature. I understand human nature that people don't like change. I understand that completely. from the very beginning when 10.0 came out, we talked about Bill Davis earlier. He was on the boards arguing on Creative Cow, this and that. First off, you usually, if somebody has their mind made up going into an argument, you're not going to change their mind. You're not going to change your mind. So all that is just something that I have better places to spend my energy. Do I prefer Final Cut? Yeah, of course. I mean, that's what I prefer.
And I think I would rest easier if I could use it all the time, because I would accept a few of its shortcomings because they are really, really small. And I think it is this schizophrenia, really, where I'm going backwards and forwards on it. And I know that Ben King and Scott Simmons is another one, and they say, well, I can use any NLE. I seriously doubt that you can have that edge if the chips are down. I think the muscle memory, it's like learning to drive when you've got to think about your foot on the clutch.
Sure.
Taking off the handbrake, looking over your shoulder. If all that is in your mind when you're trying to be creative. And so going backwards and forwards is not a good thing. I don't think it'd be fantastic. I've
seen those comments before. Now, if I was a youngster just starting out, I would learn Final Cut for sure, and probably DaVinci, and maybe Avid, depending on where I was looking to go. I mean, personally, I wouldn't go with Premiere simply because of the way they did this subscription model. That's the main problem.
It's people really object to Premiere, and I've been caught with Premiere where I've just sat in a van doing some motorbike racing and I just don't know what to do. It won't play, it won't render.
Right.
And but I suppose the experts will say, oh, well, you just don't know where to kick it. But it's terrified me. I've just never had that with Final Cut.
How many times has the Adobe servers gone down and people couldn't launch Premiere?
Yeah. Well, that's right. If it's got a phone home every time.
Yeah, it does some of the time. I think, and it's twice. I think it's happened when people couldn't open their projects because the servers were down. The heck with that. I don't want to.
It is upsetting that because it's so like Final Cut 7 was, and it was designed by Randy Ubilis, that you can get a tune out of it with the same keyboard set, and so all the outside broadcast bands went to Premiere when they were Final Cut 7.
Okay.
And because you didn't need to train anybody, I suppose. So that's annoying that Premiere did get a bit of a foothold there as well, because where it really should have been Final Cut 10, shouldn't it? Because they were already using Final Cut 7. But how many people did they lose compared to how many people they gained with the YouTube generation and iJustine and these kind of folk? I don't know.
Well, let me tell you.
Tiny, probably.
2018, they said 2.5 million seats. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I just say 2.5 million. It's now 2021. We've got to be between 3 and 4 million seats. Now, here's the thing. People say, well, how come they haven't announced those numbers recently? I can tell you what I've heard is that somebody said we're going to stop doing numbers. Not in the team, but somebody else at Apple said we're going to stop doing numbers, so that's the reason they don't announce anymore. But you can extrapolate. It went from 2 to 2.5 million from 2017 to 2018. So you can presume it's 3 to 4 million at this point. That's a lot of seats, maybe even over 4 million. It could be, because they had the 90-day trial during the pandemic.
That was fantastic.
Fantastic.
In fact, I used that to my advantage in the BBC here because I do a little entertainment show on a Friday. It's a 15-minute red carpet sort of thing. Except there wasn't really any red carpet stuff because nobody was going out shooting, so it's just Zoom interviews, really.
Sure.
But I just got them cutting it home on Final Cut. I just did it unilaterally and didn't really tell anybody, and they just loved it.
They know now.
I think it's easier. It's easier with someone who's a reporter and a presenter and a producer than the old craft editors, isn't it? I think it's much easier to convince them, or you don't need to convince them because they just see it and they get it straight away because it is easy to understand if you've never had any preconception of how something works before.
That's very true. That's very true. So if you're going to talk to the Final Cut Pro team, right? They watch these shows. I mean, I got my phone right there that they call on every once in a while. And if you're going to talk to them, what kind of things? I'm going to just go with Avid because that seems to be the biggest, the collaboration, and that one of the biggest things people talk about. What kind of things? Don't have to be specific, but just generally, would you like to see the Final Cut Pro team incorporate into Final Cut Pro without ruining it? You don't want it to have tracks all of a sudden, do you?
I know. So Mike Matstoff said that, I think, somewhere. Go for the conceptual rather than the specific, because they just won't. If you just have a list of demands, then you're just wasting your time. But no, I just think a bit easier to share things, really. So that there needs to be. It probably does need to be media management, some way of controlling. Editing is about cutting down, isn't it? So you get 8 angles on a game show and they're all just wide shots doing nothing. You've got to be able to dump that stuff when you send it out to color to somebody around the world. So I think we do need better media management. The interface with Pro Tools is fine. Sharing, I don't know. They've got to rethink the library model a little bit so that we can get into it and just work at event level. Smaller compartment, or it's XML, right click in the iCloud that updates your sequence. Something like that, isn't it? That will just oil the wheels a little bit and make me and you, we can swap cuts without having to worry about, and relinking, how it relinks. Am I asking too much already?
No, I do. No, you're not at all.
I've gone off on a great big list.
No, we like that. This is why we have these discussions.
Yeah.
You know.
But you have to look at Avid. You can't not take it seriously, can you? You have to say, well, why does it endure in this space? And so these are the things that I would like to see if I'm going to be able to get really highly respected people working on it, I think. Yeah. So media management, the trimming thing, I think I've lost that argument because people don't like trimming lots of trim rollers, and it's an esoteric thing, that, isn't it? Really,
yes,
you would like it because it's an organic feel, isn't it? That you can play out and listen and stuff. I don't think I'm going to win that one. I suspect that people on Final Cut 7 never really trim things in the same way on that software.
Okay,
so
that makes sense.
Perhaps why they don't really see it. It's a big Avid thing, that, isn't it? If it had to go, I wouldn't miss it if I was using Final Cut all the time. But yeah, media management needs to be more robust. We don't want clips coming out saying the clip's not long enough. And
no, listen, what drives me crazy is a couple of things. When I try to relink and it says, "Oh no, that clip's not right," it's the exact same clip. It's not different. I know it for a fact. Too much Final Cut. I say this. It has training wheels. It doesn't let you do things that you should be able to. That I should be able. I said, I want this clip to relink. I'll take responsibility for it. Oh no. We know better than you do. Final Cut Pro knows better than you. No, you can protect people that need protection. I don't need protection. I know what I want. One of the things that drives me crazy is the inability to not set a default preference, like mono stereo, dual mono or stereo. Why can't I set that as a default? Can't. Yeah. Why can't I set the fit to fill as a default? Can't.
Yeah, spatial conform, yes.
Spatial conform. Why can't I set it as a default? I'm always going to use this. Why? No, Final Cut knows better. I think some of those things are going to be changing. I think that's just legacy Final Cut. And I think there's going to be a new version of Final Cut coming out. And I'm going to call it for June. And there's 2 reasons. Number 1, WWDC. Mm-hmm. Number 2, it's the 10th birthday of Final Cut Pro 10, June 21st. That's when it actually came out.
Yeah, I think you could be onto something there. I mean, I'm very, very positive. I really am. But if it didn't, then I will just carry on doing what I do, really.
Well, they got to be doing something, John, right? They're not just. The Logic team went from 10.5 to 10.6 in 6 months. And 10.5 came out in May of last year, right at the very beginning, in the middle of the pandemic. So people say, the pandemic.
Thing, then, and I think Alex Gollner's talked about there's a disconnect between the top and the forward-facing Apple, the company, and this whole team of people that are really very diligent and working away carefully. I don't know. It's odd, isn't it, when Chris Hocking can sort of knock out 50 features on the back of a fag packet, it seems. But in some ways, that's amazing, isn't it, that the third party can get on board with it and get in and make things better for those. Maybe it's just a sizable minority of people.
Well, it's minority or even a majority. The thing is, though, as I say, I don't want a skeletal Final Cut Pro that needs all these third-party things to make it functional. I want some of these things built into Final Cut Pro, nuts and bolts, just built into it. So
that sounds really disrespectful to me saying that about Chris, actually, because he really gets it, and this is all free, this stuff that he does.
No, I know. I've had Chris on multiple times.
It's a huge amount of effort for him to keep all that going, isn't it?
The
expectations from the users are huge.
Well, it's free. I've talked to him multiple times. I said, how can you keep doing this for free? At some point you have to charge, and so far he hasn't. But then I look back on my Final Cut Pro radio. I've been doing it for 5 years. Never got paid. Never got paid for thousands of hours. So I'm doing exactly the same thing. And then these things, Final Cut Pro TV Live, same thing. So brilliant. I think that they will. I think Apple, if they bring back the precision editor, the trim editor, they will adjust it to be perhaps a little bit more like Final Cut Pro. I think that's probably on their radar. There's no reason to keep it exactly the same. There's no good argument for that, I don't think. Keep what you have, but make it a little better. But the thing about audio in Final Cut, I bring this up all the time. It's 10 years in June. We don't have a master fader, a volume fader in Final Cut. There's no way to bring the volume down. It's just it's compound clips. It's this, it's that, it's this and that, and yet adjust them all individually. That seems like an oversight too. But I think that's coming. The trouble is, I
start to question these things because everybody says, "Oh, you don't need these things anymore." But I think, but really, we do need it. You
don't need a master fader. I think you do.
Yeah, no, but it's the sort of thing that I just get beaten with all the time when it seems like my nickname is Moaning Matthews. So I sort of moan on about something, and it's like, no, can't you see? We don't need that now. We don't need that level of sophistication. But you think, but yeah, we do, don't we? I mean, we do. I think we do. And it isn't mitigated by range-based keywording or the magnetic timeline. Those are fantastic features.
Yes.
They don't mean that you no longer need. I don't know. It's a circular argument, isn't it, really?
No, it is. So one of the things about the magnetic timeline that I don't like is when you place markers, they're on a clip. They're not on the sequence. They're not on the project. So I set up an anchor clip at the very beginning of the project, and I anchor a title to that one frame or 10 frame anchor clip that doesn't move around when I do edits in the timeline.
But that would be a classic "you're holding it wrong" thing, would it not, from the Kool-Aid drinkers? Because they'd be saying, well, yeah, but it's not about position and time anymore. Everything's about relationships in Final Cut. So why do you need to anchor anything to anything?
When I'm cutting, I understand. I've heard the arguments on both sides. When I'm cutting something and I want to hit it exactly at 1 minute, I don't want that 1 minute marker jumping around when I move a clip. I want it to be exactly at 1 minute. I want to be something else at 2 minutes. I want to be something else at 3 minutes. And I want it to stay put. And listen, John, they have this blank area above the timeline that's not doing anything for 10 years.
Yeah, I agree. If you're making a promo, you've got to be on the caption.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's a 30-second promo,
right?
And you just want it to be there, don't you? Yes.
Well, I want it to be both. Fantastic. I want to have clip markers and sequence markers. That's just one example. Very good. we have plenty of examples. So let me see. We get lots of comments here today. Apple isn't sentimental when it comes to software. The birthday thing won't matter, in his opinion. That's from Eric Emmerich. They've never once done anything for Final Cut Pro's birthday. They never have.
But first, it's a big birthday.
10 years is a big birthday, and they said 10-year roadmap, and it's time for a big update. So that's why I'm not saying they're going to change their sentimentalness. Now, like you said, John, there's Apple Corporate, Apple Legal, and then there's the Final Cut Pro team. And they absolutely do not all agree all the time about things. I think there's constant fighting about stuff. I think that the naming of 10.5 was something that was supposed to be 10.4.11 or something because it was so small. But marketing won out or whatever, and they said, no, we're going to call it 10.5 to distinguish. This is the change to the.
I mean, I think you, because you've been to the Creative Summit a couple of times and you've been over there and you've actually met these people, I think that's helped you keep the faith, hasn't it? And you've got a sort of relationship. I think if I had that, I mean, there was the virtual one this year, which I sort of did drop in on. I think it was extremely good. Although Apple's presentation was pretty underwhelming, really, wasn't it? Because they didn't have anything to show us at all, really.
The last 2 years have normally I'm a big I work with the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit with Future Media conferences. I promote the heck out of it. Normally I would promote Apple's presentation as one of the top things, but it's been underwhelming the last couple of years, unfortunately. So this year I'm going to concentrate on other things and not be just using that as the crown jewel, because it hasn't been. It hasn't been. Now,
and I think just to interrupt you, there has been a shift away. I think Mike Matzdorf, I can't pronounce his name, in Spain, Jesu Pere Miranda. A lot of these have gone back to Avid because of their, not frustration, but they've been forced to, really, because of the lack of interfacing with traditional workflows. So there has to be something that can join the dots for us, I think, because we deserve it, don't we? I don't know. Is it the product
absolutely. Absolutely, we deserve it. We're very entitled when it comes to that. No, I have faith in the Final Cut Pro team, even when I'm disappointed with a lack of progress on something, because they've got to be doing something. Come on. I mean, I don't care if they work from home or whatever. I don't even know if they're in the Spaceship Campus. They weren't the last that I heard. They were, well, the FCPX Creative Summit last time they said they were, but you really couldn't tell. It just kind of generic office spaces. Not like Tim Cook when he goes out for his presentation and he's standing in the glass halls and stuff and showing all his. By the way, the last WWDC, the virtual one they did, I thought was one of the best ones I've ever had. Now, there's a reason for that. It's not live, and they have plenty of time to do retake after retake if they had to, and they have production rather than live. So that's the reason. But I really, really enjoyed that from a consumer of the event.
I mean, I don't even, as an editor, I've never really thought of myself as, I am a sort of industrial grade editor. I'm the guy that turns around the football, I've done documentaries, I've done everything really in the 40 odd years, but I really am just in TV making widgets. And some of these people like Thomas Grove Carter, they could edit on a Dymo labeler and they're just absolutely amazing, these people. So it isn't just about the tools, but I just think I'm doing a job and I just want it to become easier, really, to do it. And to just, it's a project-based thing, just working on something, just join it up better. And let's get to use Final Cut because it's fun. It makes me be more creative.
Right.
If that makes sense, because I try things that I wouldn't otherwise. You'd think I'd have it, oh no, I just can't face moving that around because it's just such a lot of button pushes. Because it's a very modal thing. Everything's a mode, and you have to do something before you can do something else with Avid. Whereas Final Cut, you just it's non-destructive Final Cut, isn't it? You just sort of go like that, and it doesn't overwrite anything.
Right.
So you just have a quick go. Oh yes. Oh
right.
No. It's fantastic for that. Tactile,
no, it is. I love. No, absolutely. Moving a clip around the timeline is fantastic. But by the same token, let's pull on the other point. You can't select multiple selection points in Final Cut and have them all go together. You got one at a time. So that's the downside of that model. But no, I love dragging a clip around and having all the connected clips, going with it. You don't have to even worry about it. It just closes up and move it down here and it moves over. Brilliant stuff. Brilliant stuff.
It is absolutely brilliant. It is. Yeah.
So have you ever been to NAB?
No, I've only been to America once, actually. I've been to Washington and just to do some Avid training a few years ago.
A few years ago?
Somebody, maybe when I first went freelance. No, it was EW. It was some global news network. It was like the antidote to Fox News that was being set up by people who were on secondment from here, and they knew me, and I just got to go there.
Gotcha.
It's a complete fluke, and I spent a week in Washington, which is near you, I think. But I'd never been to the West Coast. But I never say never. I mean, I think if travel becomes a thing again, I would certainly.
It looks like it's headed that way.
Meet people. Yeah, I mean, it surely will get back to normal eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, NAB has announced that they're having a physical NAB this year, but it's in October instead of right about now. So we'll see if that happens. They said that 7 out of 10 of their attendees said they will attend. If a couple of things. Number one, if it actually happens. Number two, if the coronavirus is more under control with the vaccines and stuff. Of course, those are same things that I'll be considering when I'm not going to decide today, but maybe in June, July, I'll decide. I mean, listen, the virtual things are fine. I love the in-person stuff.
Absolutely.
There's no comparison. There's no comparison.
I've been to IBC, and I suppose I've been to Amsterdam, Utrecht, and I've met up with people there. Yes, it makes a huge difference to actually go and chat to a developer in person and sort of mull things over, doesn't it? Over a coffee and stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At the Creative Summit, there's at the Juniper Hotel, there's a courtyard, and right across the courtyard is a place that has breakfast and sandwiches and stuff. So we always met over there before the day started. So you're sitting over there and you're having a bagel with Steve Martin. I didn't see Mark Spencer there, and he's more of a recluse, I think. But Steve was over there all the time. I'd see him and other people, and we'd sit and chat. I think Alex Gollner was there one time. Chris Fenwick, we were good friends from the very beginning. When Chris first started his podcast, I was on it twice, I think, the first year.
Yeah, well, these people have been part of my life for 10 years. I mean, it's a fantastic virtual community. And yes, I suppose it's odd, isn't it, that we've never met in person. Can you call people friends that you haven't met? I think you probably can. It's just another way of communicating. It's just missing a layer of intimacy, isn't it?
Right.
That you can't get by. You need to meet people in person. Yes, you're absolutely right. But we're doing our best, and it's timely that the Zoom thing has come along and been possible, hasn't it?
Yeah,
in these
it's
difficult
amazing.
Times, really.
It's amazing.
It's absolutely incredible, really.
So I've been I started the very first Final Cut Pro radio live thing was at FCP X Creative Summit, I think 2017, so it's 4 years now. And this is like number 200 or 198, I forget which. I'll have to do a count to make it official. But I've done almost 200 of these live events, starting with the very first one. It was only Facebook Live at the beginning. If 720 by 720 square, that's the only thing that they would allow at the time. And that's what it would save. And I was doing one from my bedroom at the Creative Summit and get a knock on the door, and in comes Brad Olson and Bill Davis, and I forget who else was in. Oh, Patrick Southern was there. They came and crashed the live stream. That was the very first one that I can recall. I did one at my house before I left, like a testing microphones thing. But I love the live streaming. I mean, the podcast was, when I started that, I've been podcasting for 15 years, audio podcast. Obviously not Final Cut Pro, but I started with the music one, and it's still going on to this day. And then the Final Cut Pro Radio took over. It's like having your own little radio station, and now you have your own little TV station. It's fantastic.
But they're amazing public service, Richard. I don't know how you find the time, because obviously you go away and edit them, which takes up time as well.
Well, yeah.
But I just have them in the car. I mean, and listen to them time. You get so much information out of them because you've got a really diverse bunch of people. And I think that's the thing about editing. It is about video literacy, but it's all kinds of people can be editors now, can't they? And that was not the case when I started. And just before today, I was doing a little bit of Final Cut Pro training for one of our presenters.
Okay.
Who just wants to, he's really keen. And we're a small enough team on this little strand that we do that we can do it. It's not corporate policy really, but yeah, it's not just. It's editing to a professional job, but you don't need to be a media professional to do it anymore. I think we accept that, don't we? That you still need specialists, perhaps, for certain things, but
yes,
it's almost like a driving license. As long as you've got some kind of core skill, so you're a producer or you're a presenter, editor, and then it's a can also drive. And there's no reason on earth why you can't learn 2 or 3 things as well. So that's my approach to sort of surviving the future, because I think it could be quite tough working in television in the next few years. I think it will get devalued and the budgets will shrink down to homeopathic size, I think they're going to want things done faster than ever.
Well, that's one of the downsides. I liked it better when jobs were more discriminated. Each one has their own version. The audio guy does audio, and the lighting guy does lighting, and the on-screen talent does one thing, and right now on-screen talent, I'm doing audio, and I'm doing the streaming.
The on-screen talent isn't that talented anymore either. That's the problem.
No, that's true.
But I mean, I have had a charmed life, I think, and so I'll be 60 in a few weeks' time, and I just think I needed to give something back, and I think this is for all the training that I had. There was a way, but if there was a way of making Final Cut Pro part of that as some kind of legacy, I mean, I think I'm not going to stop. There seems to be enough work, but I just want people to be nice to me. I'm never going to
win massive
awards and stuff. I mean, it can be quite a fickle business working in TV because it is quite dysfunctional when you're working people grabbing you on the arm all the time in a room this size for weeks on end.
Right.
I think I've had a bit of a charmed life, and to just be able to say, well, I had some training on this, and I do know. I think I realized I actually know quite a lot. I think when you work for the BBC as an institution, you perhaps don't realize what you know. I did get some first-class training, and so there's got to be a way of kind of passing that on, really, I think.
Well, that's great. That's great, John.
Without being arrogant. I mean, obviously I've got a lot to learn as an editor, I think, but just technical stuff doesn't worry me at all. It's easy, really. It's just knowing stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you mentioned a couple of things that you'd like to see Final Cut have that Avid has. What would you say to Avid editors specifically? I bring up the Hollywood bunch because they're the ones that argue a lot. What would you say to them in a friendly way to get them to take a second look at Final Cut? Even if you have to wait for the new version that's coming out in June, even if you have to wait till then, what would you say to them to give Final Cut a chance?
Give it a chance. Give it a chance. I think if you are just going around going, well, where's my match frame button and where's this button, then you are doomed to never get off the ground. But just think about what it is that you're trying to do, and you're just trying to tell a story, and all that matters is what comes next. And I think if you explain to people how a track-based system doesn't have those relationships. It's like the story is the melody, I always think, the tune, and then the vertical stuff, the chords are the B-roll and the things but it doesn't have a clue. It doesn't know what belongs to what, does it? Whereas with Final Cut, you talk about something and you want to illustrate it, you put that shot in there, and then that is it. You don't have to rethink that same decision. So it kind of frees you creatively, doesn't it? I think your head is stopped full of the mechanics of how you actually keep all this stuff in sync. So I think that's what I try and do to people. Say, look, this is a central spine. You put your story in there. That's the story. And then you hang things on that. And I think that concept isn't that difficult, no matter who you are, whether you're a child or a seasoned editor. That concept of it's about relationships. So I think the people that have dismissed it in the past haven't really used it.
Well, that's always the case, especially they may have heard something when 10.0 was out before we even had multicams, and that's what they're stuck with.
Yeah. So you're up against the eyes rolling. You've got that resistance now, which makes it much harder for us. Well, maybe you're not, but in TV, I think you are. One is because it's like, well, is this still a thing? It's something my child uses. Is it not iMovie? This is what you sort of. But come on, this is quite a profound, clever central storyline. It doesn't have tracks.
Yeah, it's been developed 10 years from the point you're referencing.
Yeah, it's really, really come on. It's matured now. But roles and range-based keywording and roles. If you want to organize your media, range-based keywording is amazing, isn't it?
I was just going to ask you about the keywording and favoriting in the browser. So how does Avid, do they do subclips? Is that what they do?
Yeah, subclips. I like subclips because they are tangible things. So you can have you can have your own level of audio on it, and you can rename it and stuff. So I, in some ways, they've sort of thrown the baby out with the bathwater a little bit with not having subclips. But range-based keywording, where you have these collections, I don't know. I think the jury's still out, because I think we remember where we put things, don't we? With tangible things like a subclip, or you put things on the mantelpiece, or you put things in a drawer. And if you have too much metadata and too many representations of the same thing, sometimes I become a bit snowblind. I think I've seen that shot. Oh, but it was in that smart clip. So it kind of, but that could be just because I'm not used to it enough, because I'm used to using Avid. They always say do it all in the browser in Final Cut, whereas Avid's all about string outs. I don't think it is. I think Avid's about subclips, and you can put the subclips in a string out, and the string out becomes the smart collection, with the benefit that you can change the order, which you can't order things in the browser very easily. I mean, there's a frame view in Avid with one of the bins where you can literally drag things around without putting them in a timeline. That, so that's a kind of storyboardy thing. Don't know. There's horses for courses. I do like range-based keywording. I do like the fact that you can just find stuff at the push of a button.
Yeah, I use the keywording, and I use favoriting a lot.
So filtering is clever.
Yeah. So if I'm doing a big project, I always organize in the Finder, and I keep my media external from Final Cut. So I have a nice small little file that's the database that I can duplicate, and if I have to put it on a drive or whatever. So I do the organization in the Finder. I rename clips in the Finder, and people say, well, you can mess things up. I do that before I import it into Final Cut. I don't do it after I import it.
No.
I do the organization before I import it, and then when I drag the folder over, Final Cut keeps all that information. They keep all the names that I use, all the folder connections. If you have that preference checked, that's how I do the bigger projects. Smaller projects, I don't worry about it. I just, put everything in the library and let it sit there. And people always, the other thing they always say, well, but we should keep it internal. You just have to drag one icon, one thing over. That's what I do with I make a master folder, the same thing. I make a master folder, keep the library inside of it, all my media inside. So I also just drag one thing, which is the master folder over.
But you do sound like you like these tangible Finder things. So I think there is value in that. And you remember how you've organized that stuff, don't you really?
Right.
Whereas others would say, just chuck it all into Final Cut.
Right. But if you look at, first off, people say, well, Final Cut doesn't work with Hollywood. Well, we've already seen that's not true. How many motion pictures do we have to do in Final Cut before they say, okay, well, this is an option? We've already seen half a dozen major films that are done in Final Cut. They don't keep the media internal. They keep the media external. They organize it whatever way.
Absolutely. No, it absolutely works. I suppose it is more difficult in here with 600 terabytes where people are using the punch-in voiceover tool, and it's all called untitled, and there isn't that sort of ability to rename things, and it has to have that unique ID. So that's the difference, is that it's apples and oranges, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
I think I would do what you would do, and certainly you don't want duplicate clip names, because what's the point of having something called C001 5 times over?
Right.
It's just throwing away a whole layer of functionality, isn't it?
So I taught Final Cut 7 at a local high school in Baltimore. And one of the things that I told, it's actually an all-boys class, all-boys school. And one of the things I told them, if I see the word untitled in your project name, you're going to get a demerit. You're going to get a demotion from whatever grade you were. You name those files. You name those folders. There was a good group of guys. I remember them. So
that's common sense that doesn't change, isn't it, really? And
that's right.
And I think Final Cut will not organize itself for you. You have to be organized. But leverage these tools, rejecting things and filtering and favoriting things. You can even have star ratings on keyword collections as well. It is amazing. I think if I used it, I spend more of my time advising other people than actually using it. That's the trouble. I think if I used it more, I would get more out of this stuff, I think. I would develop better ways of doing things. But I do. I mean, I did do this 45-minute doc recently, and I used all these things at my disposal. The colors threw me a wee bit, because the colors and the palette is kind of poor, and it's audio. The colors are audio based, aren't they? So
the colors are horrible. They're muted. Some people, I compare it to the Logic color palette, which is much more expansive, still restricted. Okay, you don't have unlimited colors, but it's a much more expansive color palette. So I wish Final Cut would get that. Speaking of that, have you heard people over the years? I get a kick out of this. People use emojis to distinguish their clips in the browser. And I always tell them, now you realize that what you're doing is using color. Okay? If you could color code a clip and sort by color, it would be that would be a nice feature for Final Cut. They say, well, we're using, emojis. Yeah, but you're not using gray emojis. You're using a banana for yellow, you're using an apple for red or for green, you're using this for that. You're using color to just visually, because we're visual people, we visually look at things and we can see the colors, not the shape that it's banana. Because of all
why
the
do you
emoji.
think they do that then? Why do you think they did the muted thing? And it's almost like with time coded, they've just sort of gone to great lengths to hide time code. This fact that you've got this unique frame number for every single frame, and you remember when things happened, and then we went for lunch, then we went to the pub, then we did the cutaways. It's like you can't find that stuff. Is it outmoded? That's what I have to keep asking myself. Is it just me? Do I really need this stuff anymore? But time code's amazing. I mean,
of course,
not SMPTE, not wobbling tones. This is
no.
I don't know what it is. It's a 32-bit number every frame, I think now, that's in the file. But it's a unique number that only happens once a day, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's so useful. So they sort of grudgingly put the wee project thing in, didn't they? Or the source where you can see time codes on a little floating. So I don't know about that. It mystifies me why they go to. I think they just want it to look really sleek, don't they? And they don't want to put people off, perhaps.
Well, this is what I went back to when I mentioned the hand holdings, the training wheels. Okay, I don't need that as a professional. I understand if you want it initially presented as being simple, but Logic has an advanced mode. You can go into Logic, go to the advanced mode, and click on 6 separate advanced features if you want them. So give us people that want to be able to get in there and do more advanced stuff. Give us that option. Keep it simple for a lot of people, but give us the option of being able to get at some of these things. Logic listen, when I do a podcast, once again, an hour and a half, 2 hours long, I can go into the timeline and I can just circle 6 or 7, 8 clips and color code them. Instantly in the timeline, I can see, okay, this section is this is this subject matter, this is this speaker. I can see instantly when I look at the timeline, all the color sections. And I really, really like that. I wish Final Cut had, listen, I think this is coming. They haven't done it yet. I think rather than just improving the current version of Final Cut, they said, throwing that one away. We got a new version coming out in June. You guys will just be blown away when you see it.
I thought it was maybe me, though. I mean, so take a Dissolve, for instance. I mean, before, because I always use Final Cut 7 as my reference point, because things that Final Cut 7 never had that I'm not looking for particularly, but as a missing feature, the fact that you had a Dissolve that could start on a cut and it could be centered on a cut and it ends on a cut. Now, I mean, obviously a Dissolve is a Dissolve. It's just on a cut. But the thing is the versatility of being able to move that point. So if you're mixing out or you're dissolving out of somebody's medium close-up and you want to get the last frame before the guy closes his eyes and then go through to the guitar, then you need to know where that is. So it's a mix to something, or a dissolve, as you would call modern term. It's a dissolve too. But on Final Cut, you, if it's in the primary, it's always centered. If it's on a connected clip at the start, it starts, and if it's at the other end, it ends. So what is the rationale for that? Is that just like stripping away that they're doing? They're just saying, well, we'll just keep it really simple. We'll not give you that versatility that you had with Final Cut Classic. Or is it that they didn't think about it? That's what worries me. They didn't think about it. They must have thought about it.
Yes, it's a combination of they can't do it now because of the way they've structured Final Cut, or it's too difficult, or they're not going to waste their time on it, or the idea that I make the joke about training wheels, it's just like, no. We know better than you for what you want to do. No, you don't. Okay?
But they can't use it as much as us. That's why I want these heavyweight people on board, really. I mean, the fade handles are amazing because with a magnetic timeline, you don't want dissolves on the audio because you want them to travel with the clip. So if you've got L and J cuts and you're moving stuff around, you make that fade.
Right.
So that you can see that the paradigm change has really made that more important than it was before, and superior in every way, that you've got this audio crossfade that is part of the clip, not something that goes between clips.
No.
But the fact that you can't originally you couldn't dissolve audio separate from video, it was kind of really odd, you know.
Right. Well, that's
but again, I don't think I'm asking for too much, perhaps, but you get around it, don't you? You just find a way. You find a way.
Yes. We do find ways.
And don't keep comparing one thing against the other. I mean, I think I wouldn't endlessly do that if I was using it every single day. I would just learn to live with it, really, probably, and actually realize then, as people have been telling me all along, it's really not that big a deal. You know?
Well, it's people have, everybody's, you know, people come into the argument with their own fixed opinions, and usually people don't change too much. If you know, that's not the way it works, is it, John? If you come into a discussion and both of you have your opinions, you're not going to change each other's minds. You can fight and fight and fight for 10 years, but you're not going to change each other's minds.
Shades of grey as well, isn't it? Shades of grey. So social media polarizes everything, doesn't it, really? And everybody's entitled to an opinion without there really being any repercussions. So people can sound off about things and without fear of recrimination, really. No, there's nuances in these things, and certainly I'm just interested in design and good design. And, you know, the BBC designed some amazing things in the past, like PPMs, which are outmoded now, but, you know, it was just a peak program meter. It was just very fast rise time, very slow decay time.
Gotcha.
So you could just see, and you could tell all sorts of things from that about the dynamics of you know, if you needed to compress it a bit, the needle
sure
was too fast, you know, and obviously if you're overloading the transmitter, obviously if you've got bagpipes that don't have any peaks in them, then you'd have the thing down a wee bit. So now we've got loudness and different standards and lufts meters and things like that.
Right.
But I'm interested in this stuff. It's fascinating, and Final Cut needs more of these proper Pro Tools, doesn't it? I think.
Well,
time definitely.
Yes. Final Cut needs to open up a compound clip in the timeline.
Yes.
So you have context to all the other things that's going on in the timeline. You don't want to jump to another timeline to open up a compound clip. Open it in place. Right?
Yeah, I mean, but that was a brilliant idea that they made you can compound a whole project and make these buses that you put your compressor on. And so I was doing that the other day, and then when I went to Frame.io, I realized that my notes hadn't exported because I'd encased everything in this compound clip. So yeah, it's a good idea in one way, but it gives with one hand and takes away with the other, doesn't it? You think, well, hang on, I can't actually listen to this now. I need to be able to go inside there, but here on the other side. So that's maybe what your roles-based mixer.
Exactly.
It's not a bunch of faders, but it's inserts, isn't it? It's
something.
It's buses somewhere, isn't it, that it needs?
Yeah.
So you interrupt a whole bus but still be monitoring inside.
Yes, that's what I expect. I definitely expect a mixer of some sort, whatever way the Final Cut Pro team, who we love dearly, everybody loves the Final Cut Pro team. You guys and gals are fantastic. We got the very first Creative Summit. We got into the hall over there at One Infinite Loop, and the people were on stage, the usual suspects for the Final Cut Pro team, the forward-facing people. But somebody on the stage said, if you turn around, you can see the real Final Cut Pro team or the rest of the Final Cut Pro team. And I turned around and there was a whole bunch of people all the way at the top of the hall standing across it. And then you realize these are the people that you're talking about that make this thing work. The nuts and bolts people that are putting things together.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that was, I would never forget that. I never forget that. They said that and I turned around and there you go. That's the team.
Don't insult them.
Well, that's the other thing. Be courteous. I always say, don't.
Yeah, be humble, really.
Yeah.
It can't be easy designing software, and I think collaboration is not easy. And I think that's why I'd like to see Apple have a go at it, because
I do too.
And the metadata is more complex with with favoriting and ratings and keywording than none of the other NLEs really have range-based keywording. I think at the Creative Summit, PostLabs, it's Hedge, isn't it, that owns PostLabs, they did a little merge X because they bought that app, and the guy at the end on one of the sessions that I watched, he did something that could merge keywords in both directions, so you can get metadata.
Yes.
And a lot of the guys in the Final Cut say, well, why you want to do that? You start with your stuff, you curate it, you put it in your timeline. But some people are logging things differently for different purposing and iterations, and you want to be able to combine that metadata.
Right.
So that it seems like it's ripe for the picking. It seems like that there's got to be a way of meshing all that metadata together.
Right. No, absolutely.
And the magnetic timeline should enable that as well, shouldn't it? You make a 90-second version, a 60-second,
sure,
a pre-watershed version. I mean, editing isn't just butt joins, is it? It's all going on vertically as well. But the magnetic timeline makes that easier than anything, doesn't it? Really?
Yes,
to do.
It does.
You can't do it with the track-based thing because it's a big game of clip collisions, isn't it? The minute you start moving things around.
Yeah. When they first demoed that, I was like, wow. What a game changer that is! When that was, it was right now, almost right now, 10 years ago, April, when the LAFCPUG at the time debuted that, and thank God, somebody was videotaping it. They weren't supposed to, but Apple didn't do any takedown either of the stuff. It was a big deal. You showed it to the public. We'd love to see it. I'm glad there's like 2 or 3 different versions of that, and I went through them when I first saw them. I said, wow, that's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting. That's pretty interesting. The very, very interesting, that time period. So I'm kind of expecting, I don't know, I don't think they're building it necessarily from the ground up, but I think we've got a new app coming. That's with new features that we've been asking for. And I don't think we're going to get a project renamed as a sequence and all that stuff, a timeline, I don't know where they brought that up. Who in the Final Cut Pro team thought that was a good idea, change the sequencing that's been the industry standard? I don't know.
I think that was an iMovie thing, wasn't it? I think iMovie maybe had, but it caused it, because you can't have, a project is a single entity really, isn't it? You can't use that name because it's already been used for something else. And so, that causes immense confusion. But I mean, it's not about me. I can deal with it, but it's just when you try to explain it to other people.
Right. Well, exactly.
What are you talking about? What do you think about hardware? I mean, you've obviously got your new cheese grater, your thing that's got infinitely expanding slots, and it's almost like that's now become outmoded, isn't it? Really, that these M1 things are just blowing everything away.
Well,
here's fans.
Here's the thing, though, John. So, how many years did it take for Apple to acknowledge that professionals need this machine? From the trash, I didn't buy a long time. I didn't buy the trash can because I didn't see. I just kept on using iMacs at that time. It wasn't for me. So if you spend all these years and you have a meeting with professionals, we listen to you. Here's your Mac Pro. And now you're going to go back. Oh, here's your trash can too. Doesn't make any sense. I mean, even if I'd rather have them kill the Mac Pro the way it is and don't do any more than to
the
bring
M1 chip or the M.
Well, no, I certainly want the M1 chip, but I mean the things that people need. For example, I had Gary Adcock on the show multiple times, and before they revealed what the Mac Pro was going to be, I said, Gary, how many PCIe slots do you think it should have? He says, got to have 4. Got to have 4. I said, yeah. I said the same thing. I said, yeah, 4. And he brought out 8. They gave us 8 PCIe slots.
How could you possibly complain?
How can you possibly?
It was that killed off Avid on the Mac, because in 1998, the story goes that they wanted to develop away from their AVBB compression to Meridian, and Apple wouldn't give them the ISA slots or whatever it was then, and it was at that point that they went to Windows NT. And I think they did suspend on the Apple platform for a while, but due to popular demand, because people just love the operating system. People just like to use Macs, and Hollywood is still dominated by Mac Avids, isn't it now? Right. But we've always we had Mac Avids in the 90s, and it was a disk farm on a fiber connection. We maybe had 10 Avids on this thing. It was pretty flaky. This is pre-OS 10. This is OS 9. Right. And if it crashed, it just pulled the whole thing down. Everything, every single client disappeared. In fact, there's a maxim somewhere that they say about Macintosh. Let me just see if I can just I've got it here somewhere. No, I probably can't find it now. No, I don't know. It's to do with MAC. I won't waste your time, but it's to do with the fact that it brings the whole thing down with Macs, and it didn't. It was serious business in those days.
Sure.
I thought I could have pasted it in there, but I haven't.
One of the things that I was talking to a developer about last time was the new architecture that Apple has incorporated for plugins. So exactly what you're talking about, if the plugin itself crashes, it doesn't bring the entire Final Cut Pro app down like it used to. It's almost like a sandboxing thing. I think it's a version 4.
Yeah, because that's been a problem, hasn't it? I think Joe Marler is very good, isn't he? And he talks about that, how third-party plugins can be the real bane. It's not Apple's fault, but it can just really just stop the thing in its tracks, can't it?
Well, the RX IZ Isotope has been a problem with Final Cut Pro for years. Now, I use it in Logic without issue, but it's been the number one causing of Final Cut Pro crashing for over the years. Final Cut Pro 10, and now they blame Apple.
It, haven't they? They've sorted it now.
They stopped supporting Final Cut.
Oh, really?
Yeah, version 8 does not. They won't. They say they're not until something changes. They're not
going to. 7 was good. Oh, I've got it here. Macintosh. Most applications crash if not the operating system hangs. That's what this guy was told in a Mac support course. Most applications crash if not the operating system hangs. I don't really know what that means, does it? But it certainly was serious in those days with these old Macs.
Apparently the new version of whatever I forget what it was. It was version 4 for the plugin architecture that it now will just crash itself. It won't bring Final Cut Pro down. At least that's in theory. It's like a sandboxing effect. So that sounds absolutely beneficial. So I'm looking forward. Go ahead.
What do you think about the UI? There are glitches, aren't there? There's something about Avid that it is like a big truck, with 4 flat tires and no power steering. But it doesn't suffer from glitchy things, like the skimmer not working or the clips suddenly go black or phantom clips. The funny highlighting, where you text some of it was highlighted. There's a lot of that sort of thing with Final Cut that sometimes sort of unnerves me slightly. Oh, yeah. You open it up and where's my clips? Or where's that?
Listen, I shoot on my iPhone 12 Pro Max, and a lot of times the clips will be black and they'll be offline all of a sudden. And I imported them all. They were fine. So the first thing I do when I work with Final Cut Pro and the iPhone clips, before I do anything, I make a duplicate copy of that media immediately, because sometimes for whatever reason, the communication between the iPhone clips and Final Cut is problematic. Because I use the iPhone almost all the time.
I wonder if it's a variable frame rate thing or something.
Could be.
Could be. But it is. I wouldn't say it was dogged with these things, but there are some weird sort of glitchy things that happen, aren't there, to it?
Yes.
And you, that's just not working anymore. The JKL will stop working, or you press the space bar and it won't play. I don't think it's as bad as it used to be, but the clips going black is. I did something the other day where I cropped in some shots inside the angle editor. And then all of a sudden, when I came out, they were huge inside. They had the angle viewer open, and all I could see was a few pictures. But then I restarted it, and it was fine. Right. It's software, isn't it? I don't know. But these are things that, because I have to convince people that it's a good bit of kit, it's harder, isn't it? If you say, well, why is it doing that?
Well, but all of them had their glitches. I mean, the Final Cut has certainly some. Usually, if I have a glitch that is driving me nuts, I'll go ahead and. Like sometimes the skimmer will go away in the timeline, even though it's set. It'll have to go to the browser and wiggle it around.
Fixes it, doesn't it?
Jiggle the handle, as we call it. Jiggle the handle, and then it'll go back down. That kind of stuff. I mean, that's bug fixes, and there's been some other ones. Some that were around for a while, and they got fixed, and then they came back, and they got fixed. So who the heck knows?
But the live database is incredible, though, and I've said to people it crashes faster than any other app. It just evaporates off the screen, but it just comes back, and whereas the Avid has a thing called the Attic, which is where it stores these backup. it's just when you save, it makes another copy in the attic of the version before, I think, and you can set the interval that it does this at, and then if something goes really pear-shaped, you go into the attic and you've got backup copies of all your bins,
right?
Every 5 minutes. But the whole thing is a manual save, so sure as anything, you're going to have done something really complicated under pressure, and then it'll just keel over, and you can lose. I could have a month's holiday with the amount of time I've spent, and people look at me and go, "But you'll have that, won't you?" You think, no, I won't. It's gone. It has actually gone. So it's very, very old-fashioned that way, and you get this kind of twitch in your left hand where you Command S or Control S, because it's nearly always Windows. But yes, it doesn't suffer from these sort of slightly flaky little UI glitches, but it's got the error messages that come up are just impenetrable. It's like
absolutely. I've never seen good error messages from anybody. They're just so cryptic and they don't really make any sense. So I do one app that I recommend for Final Cut Pro users is called Backups for Final Cut Pro.
Oh, that's Nick Passario's thing.
Yes, Nick's been on the show. It's fantastic. It's $18, and you can do Command S. You can manually save and label whenever the heck you want.
And you can annotate things, can't you? So I think people use that. Because the libraries become quite unwieldy, if you've got a lot of snapshots in them, they become quite bloated.
Yes.
You can use that for your iterations. And so you can think, right, there's a line in the sand. I need to go back to the director's cut. You can literally use... I wonder whether it does media, doesn't it? I've never tried it.
You can, yes. You can click the media on if you want to, but I just use it for the actual library itself.
He just... I mean, the thing is so lean and mean. You can see that he really knows how to code. It just does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? It's a tiny little application that just gives you, because 15 minutes is quite a long time for if you lose stuff.
Well,
you don't.
When I used to teach Final Cut Pro 7 classes, certified classes, I'm an Apple certified trainer. First thing I'd do, get the students in there, and I'd say, how many minutes do you think it's okay to lose when you're working on a project? And I say 30 minutes. They go, no, that's way too long. I said, well, that's the default preference that Final Cut Pro set in Final Cut Pro 7. Final Cut Pros thought 30 minutes was okay to lose because that's the default. Go right in now and change it to 5 minutes or whatever you want.
It's sore. I mean, the number of times on Avid, you 5 minutes from transmission, and people just shrug, I mean, we never got that with tape. You're just one step from disaster. You really are. Sometimes you just stare at the screen in disbelief. Really, no way can that be gone. Because I've just done 10,000 things all over the timeline.
Yes.
And so you never get that with Final Cut with its live database. And I think Resolve I don't think it's like that by default, but I think you can have it.
It has an auto save. So Logic has both. Logic has an auto save, and you can manually save as well. I like having both. That's why I use Backups for Final Cut Pro. Nick's been on the show. I found him on the radio show and on the live TV.
Very unassuming, but clearly knows his onions. He's obviously been coding a long time, hasn't he?
He has.
He's made it so compact.
He's been doing backup software all these years. That's what he does, backups.
And it only backs up the changes, so it's kind of economical in every way, isn't it? It's not sitting there grinding away, doing stuff that it doesn't need to do. Yeah, really impressive. I mean, that's the thing about the community, isn't it? And it's the same with the Lumberjack intelligence assistants and the Lumberjack systems. Their stuff is amazing. Lumberjack Builder, I used that on the last thing, and I just showed the producers how to use that, and they did that on this vertical timeline by dragging clips around, and then amazing.
Yes. I know Philip and Greg, both of them. I've seen them multiple times. Good friends of mine.
So, I don't think any other community has that real.
I was going to ask you that. So I'm not involved with the Avid community or the Premiere, so it seems like the Final Cut Pro community is very active and for the most part very, very friendly with each other and helping out. And I haven't seen that on Twitter, for example. I don't see that.
No, I think it requires a little bit of humility, doesn't it, with Final Cut? Because it is a broad church, and you have to assume that people really don't know. And as long as people are not being kind of arsy about it and bullshitting you'll do anything to help them. But I think that's what I like about it. The Avid group, it's pretty pretentious, really, and I don't like that. But then there's formidable talent there, and I worked on the London Olympics, and I mean, it was like an exam every day, wondering what was going to come up. Oh, I hope they don't ask me to do that. And what they were getting out of their Avids, with 30 of us in a room, and the billions and millions of people that were watching this stuff, just knocking out these features of, Bolt and Blake montages and things, and tracking text on rows on the River Thames, and they're doing all that with the title tool and their media composers. So, with imagination, if you know what you're doing, you can. I mean, you got to render everything,
right?
But yeah, everybody working there with headphones on, and I know that Europe has got scale, doesn't it? I know Metronome and these places have got 150 seats,
right?
But I do wonder how they do it with the media management, really, and how they control it. Duplicate clips would be the problem, I think. How you avoid that? How you avoid getting somebody else's clips twice and then you match frame.
Right. Right.
That's Avid is good at that stuff, I think. Yeah, I worked on that, and that was just unbelievable, the talent on that. So again, it's about the editors, isn't it? Ultimately,
yes, it is.
Perhaps, I was humbled, really, and again, I was like, I'll just stick to taking 20 minutes out of the hockey.
Yeah.
Yep. But I'm like the worker bee. I just sort of get the thing on the air. I suppose there's a skill in that. It's a train set in comparison to structurally editing a story, but it's still got value, perhaps.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember one year that I taught Wolf Blitzer's editing team down there in Washington, and they were I'll never forget this. They told me they would when they got in the morning, they'd hit the ground running for the entire time, but they told me they would play out the Final Cut Pro 7 timeline direct to air because they didn't have time to render. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, I did that 2 years ago. I mean, we were doing the Isle of Man TT is a motorbike race. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, the amount of people that end up dying is really quite scary. I mean, it's just there's no speed limits on the island anyway, but it's just a big homage, and motorcyclists go there for that reason, for the thrill of it. And it's and the superbikes, they don't set off till 2:00 in the afternoon, and the whole thing is onboards. That's the only coverage you can have. Even the helicopter can't keep up with these bikes because they're 200-mile-an-hour machines.
Wow.
And so they just bring all these things back, and then you join the thing up. And we did this. So this is in 2017. We did this with 15 Final Cut 7 cheese graters. No server. Well, it was an Xan, but it was all just pointing in the Finder. Sure. And then they commentate on it live. And it was a 4-part 1-hour show every night, and we had 6 seconds to go. And it gets played into a playing device, which is open-ended. But we were literally going to fall off the end of this thing in 6 seconds. So that's the kind of heavy lifting, sort of industrial grade editing that I kind of do. But I suppose it's value. It's train sets, it's chunks, a lot of it. But you can't afford to fail on it. And Final Cut Pro 7 was amazing. I think
it was.
It couldn't handle all these codecs, and it would run out of RAM now. But for doing that stuff, which is just HD TV, 1080 TV, as long as the stuff was in the right flavor, it was absolutely solid, really. So I suppose that's why people like that. They don't want to change from that, did they? They all expected that Apple would just stick in a few more bells and whistles, which it probably is what DaVinci Resolve is. Is that Final Cut Pro 8? As Alex Golan says, it's the next best thing for the last generation. It's still got tracks.
But Resolve has some innovative things, though. Some things I really like. Well, first off, I wish Final Cut Pro had dual timelines. I can drag from one timeline to another. That's not necessarily innovative, but that's something that I wish Final Cut had. Of course, it has the ability to color code clips. It has some interesting other features that I was kind of, well, that's pretty neat, and that's pretty neat. I haven't seen that before. So they do innovations as well as, sticking to legacy at the same time. If I wasn't using Final Cut, I would absolutely be using DaVinci Resolve. That's at this point, my second level. And I make myself do projects in it just so I get to learn it, because you can do all the tutorials and training that you want until you actually do a project. You really don't
can't,
know.
Yes, you can't contrive things to learn. You've literally got to just do it, haven't you? Really,
Exactly.
Yeah, and it is. You just open it up, and I'm not quite at that stage with it. And I think it is the thought of going back to tracks when I've barely got off Avid, which is tracks. But yeah, I think it's amazing,
Yeah.
and it's free. I mean, I've got the studio version
exactly.
as well.
Well, the thing about tracks is if you're not using 10 video tracks, you usually make 2 or 3. It's not that bad. Using a track, I use them for audio. Like I said, I prefer tracks for audio for more I don't mean just a simple, video edit, but I mean more complex audio. I like having tracks. For example, I have a recording studio. I use Logic Pro, and I had Digital Performer. You mentioned that earlier. I actually started on Digital Performer. I'll go into there and I'll cut a kick drum track. I'll slice it up, all the separate kick drum tracks. I need them to stay on one lane. I don't want them jumping up and down all over.
You don't want stuff moving about.
No, that would drive me nuts.
Yeah, I mean, Final Cut is vision based, isn't it? I mean, the magnetic timeline is vision based.
Yes.
Maybe I don't think that's articulated enough. That is the compromise they've made. So for me, because I can play things a little bit. I've studied harmony in music, and I've always been interested in music. And audio I take that first when I'm doing interview cut downs.
Absolutely.
I think the audio drives everything.
Yes.
I find it a little bit frustrating that it's detached audio when really it should be detached vision. And when you move stuff, the audio overlaps when perhaps you didn't want it to, because that's your dialogue, But I can see why they've done that. They've made it vision based because it makes it really simple default, doesn't it, when you start moving clips around.
So since you mentioned that, what about Final Cut Pro on the iPad? Since you said vision based, right?
Yeah.
Some parts of Final Cut Pro, the existing Final Cut Pro, it seems like you could touch it and drag it. It seems like it's almost meant for touch. Parts of the interface. Do you think we're going to get that?
I can't see with you. Well, I mean, people do say that that's what they're going to do next, isn't it?
Well,
that they are going to put it on there. And there's iMovie for the iPad, isn't there?
Yeah, but we have this though.
The pencil.
Yeah, the pencil has
Do you use
nice.
that?
I use it for LumaFusion on the iPad and other things on the iPad. So I would never get an iPad that didn't support the pencil. I love the pencil for certain things. So I guess if there's going to be, doing your finger, this big bulbous thing versus this little pinpoint thing is completely different ways of working. So yeah, you can just drag a clip from the browser and put it to the timeline, but this is more specific, the pinpoint of the pencil. So I like the pencil a lot with the iPad. Do I think it's coming?
I wonder why they never did the pencil with the trackpad. I wonder why they never, with the Magic trackpad. Do you use the trackpad? There are huge debates with people about the trackpad.
Oh, those are the things that just, I got one right here. I don't know if you can't see it, but the audience can. I got one right here because my mouse, for some reason, stopped working right before I went live.
I did a little bit of a tutorial with the trackpad because I thought the gestures were incredible on Final Cut.
Yes.
Nothing else had these things, and you can go to the next cut, to the head frames, and you go like that, and it goes to top and the end, and you can zoom in and out the time. But I think all these things, I know I've not really answered your question about the iPad, but whilst you're on about the pencil, I've just gone to a Wacom tablet, which I used for years on the Avid, and I'm now wondering, just for RSI reasons, because I think all these things with a mouse, even with the MX Master, which I know Sean Lander loves, you still got this problem with the mechanics of your wrist is lying on the desk. The vertical mouse perhaps addresses that because mechanically it's better, but with the pen, it's a much more natural feel, isn't it? So I don't know about an iPad and a touchscreen because you won't be able to see what you're doing. But the idea that you could use the pencil and a trackpad, I'm fine. This is what I'm about to try because I'm a stickler for not settling on one thing. I've even gone left-handed recently because it was getting so sore. Left-handed is.
I'm the same way. I have both the Magic Mouse, which I really like most of the time. I'm having problems with mine. But I have the trackpad too. I have them both. So, like, for example, you mentioned about zooming. So zooming in and out with the gesture is fantastic.
Yeah.
However, since we mentioned zooming, Resolve has better zoom than Final Cut. And I'll tell you why. Shift-Z will zoom into the timeline, and Shift-Z a second time will go back to the same zoom level you left.
Oh, I like that.
Dual purpose.
So like an undo zoom.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's better than what Final Cut has.
And do you get a scrolling timeline in Resolve that you like?
You get a scrolling timeline in the edit page. They don't think you need it.
Oh, that's right. It's fixed, though, isn't it? One's fixed and the other one.
Yes, you do. I mean, everybody has a scrolling timeline.
Final Cut. The video editor said, "Well, why are you looking at the timeline? You should be looking at." I'm
not looking at the timeline.
You're not. You're listening. It's an audio thing, isn't it?
For another one's audio waveforms. But here's the argument. Why, in what world does it make sense for the playhead to scroll off of the screen?
Oh, never.
Which is what happens with Final Cut. Never. No, but that's what happens in Final Cut Pro 10. It scrolls off the screen.
Avid's got the 3. It's got the doesn't do anything, falls off, which you'd never want. And it's got the scrolling one, which takes a lot of resources, so it kills it, so you don't have that one on. But it's got the other one where it just redraws it, so it just comes back and jumps to the middle.
Exactly.
But Final Cut just falls off the end.
It goes off the screen. That doesn't make any sense. That makes no sense. And nobody is paying attention to the timeline. But when I look down, I want it to be in the center. I don't want the timeline to be the playhead to be off the screen. At least, listen, an option to do that. If you don't want to, if you want your playhead to scroll off the screen, that's fine. Don't click the option. But I mean, everybody else.
There are advanced options that the seasoned user, like Logic has got, just have it in an advanced option.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is that I've heard from too many people that are in the know that Final Cut has a scrolling timeline. It's been in since the beginning. They just haven't turned it on. Well, Chris Hawking, he found it. He found the code. He's got
it going. I mean, Command Post is amazing, isn't it? And it's got overlays as well that have never been turned on, like Final Cut 7 had. You know, the just timecode stuff at the bottom that disappears when you press play, but they're exactly the same as 7. They've never turned those on.
Right. No, I get a kick out of people that said, "Oh, I don't want this feature. I don't want that feature. I don't like this feature." Listen, I want everybody to have their features. B-raw. I'm such a proponent of Final Cut Pro getting B-raw. I don't use B-raw.
That's very magnanimous of you, yes.
But the fact that
there's a need for it.
Well, the fact that other people that I talk to all the time say they want it, get it in there. Don't sit there and don't say, "I don't want this feature. I don't want this feature."
Do you think dupe detection? Dare we mention it? Do you think that again?
I think that.
Down, but I mean, the thing about it is, if you're cutting something and the producer says, "Oh, we just need to put that back in. We just need that." We came out early on that answer. We just need to put that back in. It's really hard. It's really hard without dupe detection to, because you just trim it back out and then you just really want to get rid of the edit that you made. And obviously, if you can just see. So it's, again, what was the rationale for not having that? Was there something about the magnetic timeline? Don't think so.
Probably the redrawing of the live waveforms. I think that's probably what everybody says. They can't, the powerful machines can keep up with it, but the slower machines can't, and they want to make sure everybody has the same experience. But it doesn't, just make it an option. Just make it an option, that's all. I'm not asking people that don't want the scrolling timeline, but although I cannot, a paging timeline at least, I can't see why the playhead scrolling off the screen is beneficial in any circumstance. It makes no sense for the playhead to ornament. Yeah, it makes no sense for it to scroll off the screen. At least keep it on the screen somewhere. But it's an option. An option. Same with B-raw. I don't need to shoot in B-raw, but the option for people to do, I want them to have it.
Just to go back to, you were talking about editing a sequence into a sequence. I nearly said project then. That you want that to be reductive. So this is this pancake thing that Premiere does, isn't it? So you've done a rough cut, and then you want to put your shots into your fine cut, but you want to see this one go down and this one go up. Avid has a source and record timeline because it's based on tape.
Right.
But it isn't reductive like that. And but a few iterations ago, they accidentally implemented dupe detection on the source side, so you could see on the source side when you already had it in your record side.
Okay.
It was a mistake. So they accidentally invented a brilliant feature that they then took away. But I think it is mad on Final Cut that you have to cut and paste things from one thing to another. Really strange. Avid, you can do this thing called reverse match frame, so you can match a sequence to a sequence, which is if you've got a long cut and a short cut, you can reinstate bits, or you can you can find the bits around the bits that you've already taken out, if you like. It's just about finding things in common with each other. I think Resolve might also have that. So these are quite sophisticated tools that are not deal breakers, but they're sort of things that if you've got them, when you don't have them, you can, that's really annoying that I haven't got that now. I need that. but I suppose I don't know. There's no answer. There's no point in.
No, there's no. I don't. Like I said, I don't get involved with arguing about Final Cut versus Avid versus Premiere versus Blackmagic. I have my preferences. You have yours. If you want to have it, look, like we're having a discussion. We're talking about Final Cut and Avid mostly. That's good, but not arguing. My NLE is the best NLE and everything else is, nah. That's just.
But I am in a position where I'm using something that I wouldn't choose to use, and yet find myself defending it. It's a very odd state of affairs, really. But obviously the job is I could reinvent myself as a corporate editor, couldn't I? And I do stuff at home on Final Cut all the time that doesn't go anywhere near Avid. But it is the industry standard's a daft thing, isn't it? Can you say it's the industry standard? It's not.
Yes.
What industry? But it is very, very good at certain things, and I don't think you should write these things off. And its demise has been greatly exaggerated. I mean, they've just relaunched it with this new UI, and the whingers will eventually get used to it. That the fact that they've moved a few menus around, they haven't done an awful lot. You've now got. In fact, I did a little video for them because you can dock and tab and float a bin now. Now you could do that in 1999 on Final Cut, whatever it was. 4 or 3, just by touching the UI. I don't really remember it. It was absolutely wonderful. And then you could do that, and you could tab something, and you could scale and everything. Well, Avid have only just got round to doing that, but they've implemented it in such a terrible way that everybody's up in arms about it. So they've all gone back to just having floating again. So it's like, why did you? We liked it the way it was.
Right. Well, maybe sometimes give them an option if something's going to be controversial.
But they're teaching it in the schools, aren't they? And they're teaching it in film schools, and it's not going away unless they go bust. I don't know how they make their money on the Media Composer. I think it's probably the hardware.
Right, that's what I heard. I mean, that's what I think.
Media Composer is about 10% of their overall business, but it's their sort of flagship thing because they can say, well, everything since The English Patient there is anything, any film you like was cut on this thing, and so if you're a student, you've got this thing. Wow, it's possible to cut Die Hard, whatever on here, or Terminator. They were all edited on this. I mean, they obviously a lot of effects, and it was
right, of course.
It was a very early start. The whole industry is much bigger than Avid. Things are not finished on Avid particularly.
No, things go to Pro Tools and Resolve for color or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
So, John, have we taken care of all the Final Cut Pro Avid discussion ends here? This is everything we've talked about. We've solved, right? Don't you think?
I've demented people with my ramblings, or have I enlightened you on a few things? I think, it's ended. I think it's.
No, it's listen, but there's room for both. I'm not sure if Final Cut's target is Hollywood. Some people wish it was. And yes, there are some things that we would incorporate for Hollywood that'll benefit everybody coming down. But by the same token, the opposite works as well. Mm-hmm. Doing something for YouTubers perhaps can go up as well to the Hollywood level. Hollywood's not Final Cut Pro's main focus.
No.
It's one.
Just to add, I'm assisting on a film that's been cut in Soho about Jackie Stewart, the Formula One racer, and it's been going about a year now. And I'm just parachuting from home every now and again, and that's been cut on Final Cut, just because Sean Tracy, the editor, just likes Final Cut 10, and so he's able to just do that. But I think it will be quite challenging getting it into Baselight, getting it into Pro Tools, but we will get there with it. But it can be done. Of course it can, and we've seen it with Focus.
We've seen it. We've seen it 6.
Absolutely no reason why, but it's harder because nobody's kind of doing it at that level. But that's a little film about Jackie. It's more about his home life and about his family rather than the actual racing cars. But it's destined for the cinema. and it's almost at lock stage. So, and that's great for me, because that's how I've managed to get that.
Sure,
there are not that many people that can. I'm just assisting on it, but I'm learning loads. So I mean, that's fine, isn't it?
Well, I think that there'll be more feature films cut with Final Cut going future. I don't think there's going to be fewer. I think as Final Cut even matures, and yes, one of the targets is perhaps some Hollywood features. Mm-hmm. I think we'll see more films cut with Final Cut. And then not only that, but as younger editors replace retiring editors, the younger editors are not going to have that, Final Cut is, Final Cut 10.0. I heard all about that, No, they're not, because they're coming up through YouTube and for Instagram and other places, and they're probably using Final Cut already. So I think I don't care about replacing Avid. I don't think that's going to happen next year. But I think that Final Cut and Avid could live together in Hollywood. But yeah, there's some things that Final Cut has to do to be more compatible, so you don't have to worry about going to third-party applications to take audio out.
Yeah, I've tried to canvas Avid too, and because I think with Interplay they've got a panel, a bit like an extension in Final Cut, where Premiere can work with Avid Media, and I'm trying, it's their AAF, it's impenetrable. It's a sort of binary format. It's dark matter in there, according to Philip Hodges. It's not like you can open it in a text editor. AAF is actually part of MXF, or MXF's part of
okay.
AAF. It's supposed to be advanced authoring format. It's supposed to be an open format, but it's got Avid dark stuff in there. But yeah, if only I could get my clips. So even somebody could start something on Avid and do a rough pull, give me the media, and I could cut it on Final Cut, then smuggle it back into Avid. If there was better interchange between the two, and I don't understand why that can't happen, because we had EDLs in the 80s. Because It is just ins and outs and durations. It's an ID, isn't it? There's a tape name, a start time, and a finish time. If it's cuts only, I'm not talking doing massive retimes, resizes, transforms, color correction. I'm just talking basic cutting. It must be possible to get things backwards and forwards between the two. Resolve sort of does it-ish, because it sits across all these things. So it will take an Avid AAF and sort of get it into Final Cut, but then the audio gets detached and it gets a bit, it doesn't know about the common clip container. So you can get well, it does know about it, but if it's come from Avid, sometimes it doesn't know about it. That's another thing to say about Avid, actually, is that the media is separate. The audio is separate from the vision. So you have 9 files. If you've got an 8-track XD cam, it's going to have 8 audio files and 1 video.
I see.
And that means that you can work at multiple resolutions. You can have proxies vision, but use the same audio.
Okay. Yeah.
That's just another sort of feature, if you like, that's not obvious to people, that it uses separate atomized files. Speaking
of audio in NLEs, I remember in Final Cut Pro 7, yes, the audio is supposed to be locked to the video, but not all the time. Sometimes it's out of sync coming in. And I wish there was a way, like in Final Cut, in 7, you could adjust the audio and video sync, and a little red tag would appear how many frames you were adjusting, so you can always go back. Because I have to do that.
That should be on the list of where did that go? Because it didn't. There's still a need for that, isn't there?
Well, they're saying, it's always in sync when you bring it in. No, it's not.
No,
it's not.
Nothing's in sync with digital stuff, is it? And so if you've got a wee Focusrite like this, and you're using HDMI, I think it can be 3 frames, and it's not always the same. It changes.
Right.
I think it's fantastic that you can use a GPU for an AV output. I don't know whether you can do that on Avid, and it'll even do interlaced pictures now. So you can do 1080 and UHD interlaced, 50i, 60i, LP. Right. But as you say, the sound is not coincident. So the only way is to embed it in the HDMI and somehow get it out the back of the TV or whatever. So
right.
At least in sync with itself.
Right, exactly.
But this is the brave new world of digits, isn't it? That nothing, not like us trying to talk to each other, nothing's really, the latency is a big thing these days, isn't it, with everything?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to mention about visiting the UK, and I just found this always fascinating. So the last time I was there, I went to Greenwich.
Oh, lovely. Yes. Yeah. For the Discovery and down by the Thames.
There is physically a date line in the ground. And you can go on one side of the date line and you're in one day, and you can go to the other side of the date line and you're in the other day, technically. That is just
the English must have invented time or something. Yeah. They were clever. Isaac Newton and these people. I mean, it's a beautiful place as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I remember this was my friend Bill Carter from the Screaming Blue Messiahs. We were up there and we went to a restaurant there. And I didn't have fish and chips when I was in London. So they had fish and chips. And I said, should I get the fish and chips, or they're not going to be as good as they are in London? And the waiter looked at me and said, because, sometimes you can insult people and you didn't really mean to. I didn't really insult him, but he said, I'll tell you what, if they're good, if the fish and chips are good, if they're not any good, you don't have to pay me anything. But if they are good, you pay me double. That's what he said. He paid me double. So I said, that's okay. Just I'll order them, and then I'm not taking that bet because I don't want to be paying double for fish and chips. I don't remember that. They were fine.
Fish supper in Scotland, the fish supper for some reason. Yeah, the differences in the way they call things. But yeah, fish and chips good fish and chips is hard to beat, really, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, it is. Well, plus the English breakfasts were really fantastic.
Oh, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and of course tea, and then they have coffee over there. When I was there the last time, so I'm a coffee drinker, but I do love English tea as well, Irish tea as well.
You can't seem to get tea if you go to Europe. They don't seem to do tea. It's just sort of insipid. It doesn't seem. They don't get it really. I think the water needs to be boiling. I think that's the problem.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things was that the English tea. Like I go to Stansberry's and just the regular generic tea was good. You don't have to buy specialty. Here I had to buy specialty. I mean, special English breakfast tea in Irish and stuff to get the good stuff. But there, you just go to Stansberry's or Stanberry, whatever it's called, and buy the regular stuff, and it's fantastic. Yeah, when I came back from England last time, because my friend had the electric kettle, I got one as soon as I came back. So I have multiple versions.
Boiling.
Yes, and I bring them with me to when I go to NAB and Final Cut Pro Creative Summit. I have a stainless steel pour-over electric kettle that I bring so I can make coffee in my hotel room without leaving first thing in the morning when I get up. I don't want to have to get dressed and then go downstairs and get coffee. I want it when I wake up. That's how I wake up.
You're a great coffee drinker, aren't you? Yes.
Yes.
No, I mean, I love coffee too. But these things, drink a lot of this stuff, really.
I drink 2 or 3 cups a day. Tea. I like tea as well.
You can probably drink twice as much tea, can't you? Because I suppose the caffeine is less. But yeah, the English breakfast or the Ulster fry, I suppose. Yeah, it's probably not very good for you. But
no.
You don't feel hungry for quite a long time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
John, I think we've covered everything. I think we've taken care of all the issues with Final Cut Pro and Avid. No more. Anybody that has any issues with it, just refer them to this broadcast, and we've answered every one of their questions.
Okay, I agree. I think. Thank you so much for having me on. It's
absolutely. Well, this is part
really
1.
Interesting.
This is part 1. We will have you back for part 2.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, blimey. I better do some homework and get some, because there's going to be loads of angry questions about.
Well, that's
maybe not.
How can people
just prattling on about Avid again? I mean, it's
no. We've talked about both. I think we've been pretty fair for both.
I am just the last word on this is that I am a conciliatory person, really, and I'm a team player as well. I think that's sometimes why I find editing quite hard, because it's a solitary job. I like the team thing. And I really want everybody to get on, and I want, sort of get the collaboration thing off the ground, because it's creative, isn't it? That you can send things to each other and change things and color things and add music to things. And so we need to be able to do that with Final Cut.
Absolutely. So I'll be looking forward to this new version of Final Cut when it comes out, whether it's 10.6 or Final Cut Pro 11, whatever the heck the team's going to call it. And June's a good time. That's a good time to release it.
It'll be good for a good tonic, won't it? Because we will hopefully just be coming out of this interminable lockdown.
Yes.
And feeling a bit better, hopefully. Maybe not traveling, but yeah, that would be a really nice surprise.
Well, the CDC just came out and said we don't have to be 6 feet apart anymore. We can now be 3 feet apart. So that's That's encouraging, isn't it?
Yeah,
You know,
it is absolutely. We're all feeling better here. I mean, they vaccinated. There's 56, maybe 60 million, 65 million.
Right.
I think they've done 24 million in the UK now has been vaccinated.
Over 100 million in the United States. That's almost a third of the population. I remember when they were first talking about vaccines. You'll never have them out in 9 months. You'll never have them out. Here they are in 9 months, and they're here. They said it's going to take years. No, you get rid of red tape, and you can do things. That's
absolutely fantastic. It's a real success story, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, heroes. Okay, well, thank you very much for having me, Richard. I'm sorry about your technique. I worried that it was something that my firewall here was.
No, the Skype works. Skype's always my backup. And I'll find out what the heck went on, but that's fine. And we'll talk to you more on Final Cut Pro Radio on the Facebook group and other places. And we will have you back on, John. It's been a real pleasure. Where can people contact you? Do you want people to contact you first? I should ask that.
Well, I don't have I have a website, but it's not really active. So it's just John. Blue Bicycle, that's what I am. So all one word, BlueBicycle, bluebicycle.tv is my company. So I'm John at bluebicycle.tv. I'm on Twitter a little bit as that, but I'm sort of keep myself to myself. I'm not really out there. You can see me on Facebook, obviously, moaning on about stuff.
Yeah, well, that's I have Facebook because of Final Cut Pro. I have Twitter because of Final Cut Pro.
I use Facebook almost exclusively for Final Cut. Really,
that's same with me.
I'm not a big fan of Facebook at all. But
no, I'm not either.
That's where it is, isn't it? That's where it is, and so that's where you have to be, isn't it?
That's for the Final Cut Pro community. My personal Facebook is for my family and friends, and a few professionals that I know from Final Cut Pro, but mostly it's family and friends. But I belong to half a dozen Facebook groups, Final Cut Pro Facebook groups. That's how I communicate.
Yeah,
they're watching us right now.
I hope so. Okay, thank you very much for having me on, Richard. It's an absolute pleasure.
Absolute. Thank you, John, so much.
Okay, bye-bye.